Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Dawn brought an eerie silence to Shadowfen. The fires had been extinguished, leaving the courtyard a smoking wasteland of ash and blood. Bodies lay scattered across the stones, warriors in Shadowfen's colors, rogues in their patched armor, and a handful of she-wolves who'd finally fought back and paid the ultimate price. Viridian stood on the steps of the citadel, watching the sun paint the devastation in shades of gold. Her dress was ruined, soaked in blood and soot. The shallow wound on her back throbbed with each breath. Exhaustion pulled at her bones. But she remained standing. Around her, the survivors gathered. Rogues, maybe 200 of them, more female than male, stood in loose formation, weapons still drawn, eyes wary. They'd won the battle, but none of them looked celebratory. They'd lost too many. The Shadowfen she-wolves clustered together near the citadel walls, freed from chambers and quarters, blinking in the daylight like creatures emerging from caves. Some wept. Some stared in blank shock. A few smiled with trembling lips, as if afraid the freedom might be snatched away. And in the center of the courtyard, bound and kneeling, were 37 male wolves, the survivors of Kale's forces. Warriors who'd surrendered when it became clear the battle was lost. Advisors who'd hidden in locked rooms. A few younger males who'd been too sick from Maya's poison to fight. Kale knelt at their center, iron chains around his wrists, his face swollen and bleeding from the silver wolf's blow. But his eyes burned with rage and something that might have been disbelief. Even now, even defeated, he couldn't quite accept that she-wolves had brought him down. The silver wolf descended the steps to stand before the prisoners. Up close, in daylight, she looked both younger and older than Viridian had thought. Her face bore the scars of survival, a thin line across her cheek, a notch missing from one ear. But her eyes held centuries of determination. "My name," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard, "is Rhiannon Nightshade, former Luna of Shadowfen, daughter of Maya, mate to the male who tried to break me." She looked at Kale with an expression devoid of anything soft. "You told everyone I died, that I was weak, that I couldn't survive my punishment. You should have." Kale spat blood. "Any other female would have. Any other female would have been alone." Rhiannon gestured to the rogues behind her. "I found others who'd escaped. She-wolves who remembered what it meant to be wild. We built something new in the wilderness. A pack without chains, without submission. And we swore we'd come back for our sisters." She turned to address everyone, rogues, Shadowfen wolves, prisoners. "For 300 years, this pack has operated on a lie. That males are meant to lead and females to serve. That order requires oppression. That strength comes from control." Her voice rose. "But we are living proof that the lie is broken. We are still standing." A cheer rose from the rogues and freed she-wolves, ragged at first, then growing stronger. Kale laughed bitterly. "You think you've won? You think killing me changes anything? The other southern packs will never accept this. They'll come for you. They'll destroy you and everyone who followed you." "Then let them try," Maya said, emerging from the crowd. She looked older in the daylight, the night's battle having taken its toll. But when she saw her daughter alive, truly alive, she crossed the courtyard and pulled Rhiannon into a fierce embrace. Mother and daughter held each other for a long moment, and Viridian saw tears streaming down both their faces. When they finally parted, Maya turned to Kale. "You told me she was dead. For 3 years, I mourned her. And all that time, you knew she'd escaped. You knew, and you let me grieve." "She was dead," Kale said flatly. "The moment she ran, she ceased to be Luna. She ceased to exist." "No." Maya's voice was hard as stone. "The moment I sent her north, the moment I helped her escape while you thought she was dying, that's when she became more than Luna. She became free." Kale's eyes widened. You helped her?" "Of course I did. You think a she-wolf half-dead from whipping could make it past the guards on her own? I drugged their wine. I stole supplies. I told her where to run." Maya smiled coldly. "And then I stayed behind to watch your empire rot from within." Around them, the freed she-wolves were murmuring, the story spreading. Viridian felt something shift in the air, a recognition that this rebellion hadn't started 3 days ago with the rogue attack. It had started 3 years ago, with one old she-wolf refusing to let her daughter die. What happens now? Vance spoke for the first time since surrendering. The beta stood among the prisoners, his expression carefully neutral. You can't hold the Citadel forever. Even if the other packs don't attack, you don't have the numbers to defend this place. Or the resources to feed everyone. He's right, said Corbin, the older advisor. Despite being bound and defeated, he spoke with the calm authority of someone used to council chambers. I don't agree with everything Cale did, but he maintained order. He kept the pack fed, defended, and stable. Can you do the same? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Victory in battle was one thing. Building something after was entirely different. Viridian stepped forward. We can, but not the way it was. She looked around at the assembled wolves, conquerors and conquered, rogues and residents, males and females all mixed together in the smoking ruins. Shadowfen was built on submission. We'll build something different, something better. Pretty words, Cale sneered. But you're just a sheltered northern princess playing at revolution. You have no idea how to run a pack. You're right, Viridian admitted. I don't. Not the way you did. But I know how it was done in the north, where she-wolves fought beside males. Where mates chose each other instead of being claimed. Where strength came from unity, not domination. She turned to Rhiannon. And I know you've been running a rogue pack for 3 years. Keeping wolves fed and safe without walls or chains. Between us, between all of us. She gestured to the crowd. We have the knowledge we need. We just have to be brave enough to try something new. And what of us? Corbin asked, rattling his chains. The males who served the old order? Do we die? Get exiled? Sent to your version of silence chambers. The question made several of the freed she-wolves stiffen. Viridian could feel their hunger for revenge, their desire to see these males suffer as they'd suffered. But she remembered her own words from the night before. If we kill him like this, we're no better than he is. That depends, Viridian said carefully, on whether you can accept the new order. Whether you can live in a pack where females have equal voice, equal power, equal worth. Where no one kneels except by choice. And if we can't, asked one of the younger warriors, then you leave. Exile, not execution. But if you stay, if you swear to uphold the new ways and then break that oath. She let the silence stretch. Then you face judgment by those you harmed. Rhiannon nodded slowly. I can accept that. Mercy for those willing to change. Justice for those who aren't. She looked at Cale. But the Alpha is different. He's not just a warrior who followed orders. He created the system, refined it, made it worse than his ancestors ever did. His judgment must be public. Agreed, Maya said, and several other she-wolves murmured assent. Then we hold a trial, Viridian said. Let every she-wolf he hurt speak. Let them tell their stories. And when they're done, let them vote on his fate. The traditional way would be trial by combat, Vance said quietly. The accused fights their accuser. If they win, they go free. The traditional way is how we got here, Viridian countered. And I'm done with tradition. They spent the morning organizing chaos into something resembling order. The wounded were taken to the healing wing, where Sage and her assistants worked tirelessly to save as many as possible. The dead were collected and laid out in the training yard, rogues on one side, Shadowfen warriors on the other, she-wolves in the center. They'd be honored later, burned with the proper rites once the immediate crisis passed. The prisoners were moved to secure quarters, not the silence chambers, which Rhiannon ordered sealed permanently, but regular barracks with guards posted. Cale was isolated in his own chambers, his hands and feet chained, 2 rogues watching him at all times. The freed she-wolves from the silence chambers were brought to the surface. Viridian wasn't prepared for the sight of them. 43 she-wolves emerged from below, blinking in the sunlight like ghosts given form. Their hair had been shorn, their bodies thin from inadequate food. But worse was the emptiness in their eyes, the look of wolves who'd forgotten how to be anything but obedient. Saren, who'd led the rescue, had tears streaming down her face. "Some of them don't even remember their names," she whispered to Viridian. "We told them they were free, and they just stared. They didn't understand the word." Maya worked with the forgotten gently, speaking to them in soft tones, trying to coax recognition back into their eyes. A few responded, younger ones, or those who hadn't been below long. But many just sat, silent and still, waiting for orders that would never come again. "It'll take time," Sage said, joining them. "Months, maybe years. The mind can only endure so much before it breaks in ways that don't heal easily. But they're young. There's hope yet." Food became the next crisis. The Citadel stores were adequate for the original population but couldn't feed 200 additional rogues indefinitely. They'd need to establish supply lines, trade with nearby territories, maybe even plant crops if they intended to stay long-term. "We could move," Rhiannon suggested during an impromptu war council that afternoon. Viridian, Rhiannon, Maya, Saren, Vance, and a few other key figures gathered in the ransacked council chamber. Return to the wilderness. The Citadel carries too much history. Too much pain. "Running won't solve the problem," Vance countered. He'd proven surprisingly helpful once he'd sworn his oath to the new order. "The other southern packs will see this as chaos. They'll try to claim Shadowfen territory for themselves, or they'll band together to crush the rebellion before it spreads. Either way, conflict is coming." "Then we prepare," Viridian said. "We send envoys to the other packs. Not to ask permission, but to inform them. Tell them Shadowfen has changed leadership. That will defend our borders, but we're not looking for war." "And if they attack anyway?" Corbin asked. He'd also sworn to the new order, though Viridian suspected it was more pragmatism than genuine conversion. "Then we fight," Rhiannon said simply. "We didn't survive this long just to surrender to the next tyrant." The discussion continued for hours, covering everything from food distribution to border patrols to how to integrate the rogues and Shadowfen wolves into a cohesive pack. It was messy, chaotic, and everyone had different opinions. But they were talking, debating, arguing without violence. For Viridian, who'd sat silent through council meetings while males decided everything, it felt like breathing after drowning. The trial was scheduled for the following morning, giving the she-wolves time to prepare their testimonies. But that evening, Viridian received an unexpected visitor. She'd been given chambers near the Great Hall, not the Luna's rooms, which she'd refused to return to, but smaller quarters that felt less like a cage. She was attempting to clean the dried blood from her hair when a knock came at the door. "Come in," she called, expecting Neve or Maya. Instead, it was Vance. The beta entered cautiously, his hands visible and empty. Viridian, may I speak with you?" She gestured to a chair, suddenly wary. "Of course." He sat but didn't relax, his posture tense. "I wanted to apologize. For standing by while Kale did what he did. For not questioning his methods. He struggled for words. For being complicit." Viridian studied him. "Why did you? You're not cruel like he is. I've seen you with your mate, with your pups. You're capable of kindness. So, why did you enable his cruelty?" "Because it was easier than fighting it," Vance admitted. "Because I benefited from the system, even if I didn't create it. Because I told myself that as long as I personally wasn't hurting anyone, I could ignore what was happening around me." He met her eyes. "I was wrong. And I'm sorry. Tell that to the she-wolves in the silence chambers. Tell it to Isolde, who died in battle yesterday. Tell it to the servant who was whipped for spilling wine." Viridian's voice hardened. "Your apology means nothing to them." "I know." He stood. "But I'm offering it anyway. And I'm offering my service to whatever comes next. I can't undo what I allowed. But maybe I can help build something better." After he left, Viridian sat in the dark, thinking about complicity, about how systems of oppression required not just tyrants, but also those who looked away, those who benefited from injustice, but claimed they weren't responsible for it. Kale had built the cage, but wolves like Vance had maintained it. Both were guilty, But only one had apologized. She didn't know if that was enough. But it was a start. The trial began at dawn in the courtyard, where all could witness. Kale was brought out in chains, forced to stand on the same platform where he'd once claimed his lunacy. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Rhiannon served as judge, standing tall in armor cleaned of blood. Kale Nightshade, former alpha of Shadowfen, you stand accused of tyranny, assault, murder, and crimes against the spirit of pack law. These she-wolves will now speak their truth. You will listen, and when they are done, they will vote on your fate. This isn't a trial, Kale said coldly. This is revenge dressed up as justice. No, said a voice from the crowd. Ren stepped forward, ancient and unbowed. Revenge would be whipping you 10 times and calling it mercy. This is something you never gave us, the chance to be heard. One by one they came forward. A she-wolf who'd been sent below for laughing too loudly during a feast. She'd spent 2 years in the silence chambers and emerged unable to speak above a whisper. Another who'd been forced to watch her daughter whipped for learning to read. Education was unbecoming in females. A third whose mate had beaten her regularly, and when she'd asked Kale for help, he told her that domestic discipline was a male's right. The testimonies went on for hours. Some she-wolves spoke in clear voices. Others could barely whisper. A few couldn't speak at all, and had others tell their stories. Kale stood through it all, his expression shifting from defiant to uncertain to something that might have been horror. As if he'd never truly considered how his actions looked from the other side. As if their pain had never been real to him until forced to witness it. When the last she-wolf finished, Rhiannon turned to him. Do you have anything to say? Kale was silent for a long time. Then, I believed I was keeping order. Maintaining tradition. Doing what was necessary for the pack's strength. And now, Rhiannon pressed. Now I see that I built a prison and called it peace. His voice was hollow. But that doesn't change what I did. Doesn't bring back the dead. Doesn't heal the broken. No, Rhiannon agreed. It doesn't. She turned to the assembled she-wolves, hundreds of them now, freed captives and rogues and rebels all standing together. You've heard the testimonies. You've heard of his admission. Now you must choose. 3 options: death, exile, or imprisonment. All in favor of death. Hands rose. Maybe a third of the crowd. Exile. Fewer hands. Maybe 20. Imprisonment. The rest. Not quite a majority, but the largest group. Then imprisonment it is, Rhiannon declared. You will be kept in secure quarters. Not the silence chambers. Those are sealed forever. But you will be confined, fed, kept alive but separated from those you hurt. Perhaps in time, you'll truly understand what you did. Perhaps not. Either way, you'll have years to think about it. Kale's face was unreadable.
And the pack?
What becomes of Shadowfen? Shadowfen is dead, Rhiannon said. What rises from its ashes will be something new, something better. She looked at Viridian. What should we call it? Viridian thought of the north, of Frostborn Keep, of the wolves who'd raised her to stand tall, of her mother, who'd been Luna and warrior both. Moonshadow, she said. We'll be the Moonshadow Pack. Because we're forged from both light and darkness. From pain and hope. From everything they tried to break us. The name rippled through the crowd. Testing it. Tasting it. Then, as one, the she-wolves began to howl. The sound echoed off the citadel walls, rising into the morning sky, a chorus of voices that had been silenced for 300 years finally given sound. And in that howling, Viridian heard not just triumph, but promise. They had won the battle. Now came the harder part, building peace. That night, after Kale had been locked away and the courtyard cleaned and the dead given their rights, Viridian stood on her balcony, watching the moon rise. Rhiannon found her there. You should be celebrating. We won. Did we? Viridian asked. Or did we just create a different kind of chaos? Both, probably. Rhiannon leaned against the railing. Building something new is always messy. It's always hard. There will be wolves who resist change. Others who push for too much too fast. We'll make mistakes. Probably a lot of them. Comforting, Viridian said dryly. But, Rhiannon continued, we'll make those mistakes together. As equals. And we'll fix them together, too. That's the difference. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Rhiannon said, I heard you refused to return to Luna's chambers.
Good.
Those rooms carry too much history. They're not mine, Viridian said simply. I'm not Luna anymore. Not really. There is no Luna in Moonshadow. No Alpha either. Just wolves trying to find a better way. You sound like a leader to me. Then Moonshadow has two leaders. You and me, plus Maya, and Saren, and probably Ren and Sage, and half a dozen others. Viridian smiled. Maybe that's the point. Maybe strength doesn't come from one wolf at the top. Maybe it comes from many wolves standing together. Rhiannon's laugh was surprised and genuine. You're wiser than I was at your age. When I was Luna, I thought I had to be perfect, obedient, exactly what they wanted. It nearly destroyed me. What changed? I realized that perfect and broken are the same thing. That the only way to truly live was to be imperfect, messy, real. She looked at Viridian. You figured that out faster than I did. I had good teachers, Viridian said, thinking of Maya's warnings, Neve's quiet courage, all the she-wolves who'd risked everything to build something better. Below, in the courtyard, wolves were gathering around a bonfire. Rogues and former Shadowfen residents, males and females, all mixing freely. Someone had found instruments, a drum, a flute, something stringed. Music rose into the night, hesitant at first, then growing bolder. And then, impossibly, laughter. Come on, Rhiannon said, offering her hand. If we're going to lead this pack, we should at least meet the wolves in it. Viridian took her hand, and together they descended into the firelight, into the noise and chaos and hope of wolves learning to be free. The revolution was over. The real work was just beginning. And for the first time in months, Viridian felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Not happiness, exactly. Not yet, but possibility. The possibility that broken things could heal. That chain once removed left room for wings. That wolves who'd learned to survive might finally learn to thrive. The moon watched over them all, silent and silver, bearing witness to the birth of something new. Something fierce. Something free. Chapter 9. Embers of the Old Order. 3 weeks after the fall of Shadowfen, a raven arrived bearing a blood-red seal. Viridian was in the gardens, no longer rigidly geometric, but slowly being allowed to grow wild, when Neve found her. The girl's face was pale, her hands trembling as she held out the parchment. It's from the Southern Coalition, Neve whispered. All 5 remaining packs. They're demanding an audience. Viridian broke the seal and read, her stomach sinking with each word. To the unlawful occupants of the former Shadowfen territory. We, the United Alphas of the Southern Coalition, have received reports of unprecedented violence and chaos within your borders. The murder of Alpha Kale Nightshade, the overthrow of legitimate pack authority, and the installation of rogue leadership represents a threat to the stability of all Southern territories. You are hereby commanded to present yourselves at the gathering grounds within 7 days to answer for your crimes. Failure to appear will be considered an act of war. The Coalition will respond accordingly. We await your compliance. Signed by the 5 Alphas of the South. They think Kale is dead, Viridian said, reading it again. We sent word that leadership had changed, but they must not have believed. Or they don't care, Rhiannon said, appearing from the pathway. She'd been training with the rogues, and sweat still gleamed on her forehead. They see an opportunity. Shadowfen was the strongest southern pack. With us in chaos, they can either absorb our territory or eliminate us as a threat. We should ignore it, Saren said, joining them. We don't answer them. We owe them nothing. If we ignore it, they'll attack, Viridian countered. They're giving us a choice, come talk or come fight. Either way, they're forcing a confrontation. Rhiannon studied the letter, her expression unreadable. The gathering grounds. Neutral territory, traditionally used for interpack negotiations. If we go, we'll be surrounded by their warriors. They could kill us and call it justice. And if we don't go, they'll invade within a month, Maya said, appearing with Ren and Sage. Word was spreading fast. We're barely holding together as it is. We can't survive a war with 5 packs. They gathered in the council chamber, no longer just a room for males, but a space filled with voices both feminine and masculine. 20 wolves now sat at the table, Viridian and Rhiannon, Maya and Sage, Saren and Neve, Vance and Corbin, Briar and Kala, and 10 others representing different factions within Moonshadow. Democracy, Viridian had discovered, was loud. We have to respond, Corbin said. But carefully. If we show weakness, they'll pounce. If we show too much strength, they'll see us as the threat Kale always was. Then we show them something they don't expect, Viridian said, an idea forming. Not weakness or strength. Truth. Explain, Rhiannon said. We bring witnesses. She-wolves who can testify to what Shadowfen was. What Kale did. We make the other alphas see that what happened here wasn't chaos. It was justice. Viridian looked around the table. And we bring Kale himself. The room erupted in protests. Absolutely not, Saren said. He's dangerous. He's chained and broken, Viridian interrupted. But more importantly, he's proof. Proof that we didn't murder him in cold blood. Proof that we're trying to build something better, not just tear down what was. It's risky, Vance said slowly. But it might work. The coalition respects strength, yes, but they also respect order. If we can show them that we have control, that we're not just rogues wreaking havoc. We might survive this, Rhiannon finished. She looked at Viridian with something like respect. When did you get so tactical? I've been learning from the best, Viridian replied, meeting her eyes. The vote was close, but it passed. They would attend the gathering. They would bring witnesses and proof. And they would bring Kale. 7 days to prepare for a meeting that would either legitimize their revolution or end it. The preparations consumed them. Viridian spent hours with the she-wolves who'd agreed to testify, helping them craft their stories, not changing the truth, but shaping it into something the alphas might understand. Male wolves respected different things than she-wolves did. They needed to hear about broken pack bonds, violated trust, systems that weakened rather than strengthened. It felt dishonest, translating female pain into male language. But it was necessary. Rhiannon worked with the warriors, both rogue and reformed Shadowfen, drilling them in defensive formations. We go in peace, she told them, but we prepare for war. If the coalition attacks, we make them regret it. Maya coordinated supplies and logistics. 7 days' journey to the gathering grounds, 7 days back. Food, weapons, medical supplies, enough for 100 wolves. The delegation would be large, a show of numbers. But even with all the activity, tension simmered beneath the surface. The integration of rogues and former Shadowfen wolves was proving harder than anyone had anticipated. Old resentments ran deep. A rogue she-wolf who'd escaped 5 years ago found herself face-to-face with the guard who'd beaten her during her capture. A reformed warrior discovered his mate had been sent to the silence chambers for asking too many questions. Small fights broke out. Arguments turned physical. Twice, Viridian had to intervene personally to stop violence from escalating. We're not ready for this, she confided to Neve one night. We're barely holding together as a pack. How are we supposed to convince the coalition that we're stable? Maybe we don't, Neve said thoughtfully. Maybe we show them that we're something new. Something they don't have a name for yet. Not stable like the old packs were stable. That stability was built on subjugation. But stable in a different way. Messier, louder, more chaotic. But also more real. Viridian looked at the young she-wolf who'd once trembled at every shadow. Now Neve spoke in council meetings, organized supply chains, and stood tall when challenged. The revolution had transformed her. It had transformed them all. On the 3rd day of preparations, Viridian visited Kale. He was kept in a tower room, comfortable enough, with a bed and books and windows that let in light. But the door was locked, and guards stood watch constantly. A gilded prison, much like the one he'd built for his Lunas. He sat by the window when she entered, staring out at the gardens he'd once controlled so completely. He'd lost weight, and his face carried new lines that made him look older. "Come to gloat?" he asked without turning. "Come to talk." Viridian sat in the chair across from him, maintaining distance. "In 4 days, you'll be presented to the Coalition. They need to see that you're alive, that we haven't simply murdered you and claimed power. And then what? I become your proof that you're civilized." His laugh was bitter. How ironic. The Luna who is supposed to submit becomes the Alpha who demands my submission. I'm not an Alpha, and I'm not demanding your submission. I'm asking for your testimony. Now he did turn, his eyes sharp.
About what?
About what Shadowfen was. What you built. Why did it fall? Viridian leaned forward. The Coalition sees us as chaos. Rogues who destroyed order. But you know the truth, that the order you built was already crumbling. That the system you inherited and perfected was unsustainable. You want me to condemn myself? Kale asked. To tell them I was a tyrant? I want you to tell them the truth, whatever that is. Viridian held his gaze. You're intelligent, Kale. You understand pack dynamics, power structures, how systems work. You know that what you built here couldn't last forever. She-wolves were finding ways to resist, even before I arrived. The silence chambers were fuller every year because more wolves were questioning. The rogues were growing stronger because more females were escaping. So you're saying I failed, he said flatly. I'm saying the system failed. And you are its victim as much as its perpetrator. Kale's expression shifted. Surprise, then something like pain. Don't try to make me sympathetic. I knew what I was doing. Every whip stroke, every she-wolf sent below, every Luna I broke. I knew. Then tell the Coalition that. Tell them you knew, and you did it anyway, and where it led. Viridian stood. Because if you don't, if you refuse to speak, they'll see our revolution as nothing but violence. They'll crush us to prevent it from spreading. And everything we've built, everything those she-wolves died for, will be lost. She moved to the door, then paused. You told me once that I was stronger than I knew. You were right. But what you didn't understand is that strength isn't about domination. It's about choosing to build something better, even when the old way was easier. And you think I'm capable of that? Kale asked quietly. After everything? I think you're capable of honesty, at least. Whether you choose it is up to you. She left him there, staring out at gardens he'd never control again, and hoped she hadn't just made a terrible mistake. The night before they were set to depart, Viridian couldn't sleep. She stood on her balcony, watching the moon paint silver across the courtyard below. Tomorrow they'd leave, for the gathering grounds. Tomorrow everything they'd fought for would be tested. Can't sleep either? Rhiannon's voice came from the shadows. She emerged onto the balcony, carrying 2 cups of something that smelled like honey and herbs. Maya's special brew. Supposedly helps with anxiety. They sat together in companionable silence, sipping the warm drink. Below, guards walked their patrols, but now those guards included she-wolves. One of many small changes that added up to revolution. Are you afraid? Viridian asked finally. Terrified, Rhiannon admitted. I spent 3 years in the wilderness, surviving by wit and will. But this? Facing down 5 alphas and convincing them we deserve to exist? This is different. What if we fail? Then we fight. And if we lose, at least we tried. At least we showed every she-wolf in the south that resistance is possible. Rhiannon's eyes reflected the moonlight. That's worth dying for. I don't want to die, Viridian said. I want to live. Really live, not just survive. I want to see what Moonshadow becomes. Whether we can actually build something lasting. Then we'll have to make sure we don't die. Rhiannon smiled grimly. The delegation is strong. We have warriors, witnesses, and truth on our side. That's more than Kale ever had. And if truth isn't enough, then we'll find out what else we're made of. They departed at dawn, a column of 100 wolves stretching along the southern road. Viridian rode near the front with Rhiannon, both of them dressed in practical traveling clothes rather than anything ornamental. They weren't going as decorative Lunas, but as leaders, and their appearance reflected that. Behind them came the witnesses, 12 she-wolves who'd agreed to testify, including Ren, Saren, and several who'd been freed from the silence chambers. They were the heart of their case, living proof of what Shadowfen had been. Kale rode in the middle, heavily guarded, his wrists bound. He'd agreed to testify, though what he would say remained uncertain. Viridian caught him watching her several times during the journey, his expression unreadable. The warriors formed the rear, 50 of them, a mix of rogues and reformed Shadowfen soldiers. Vance commanded them, his experience proving invaluable. He'd reorganized the fighters into integrated units, rogues and residents, working together despite the tension. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about Moonshadow was perfect, but it was real. The journey took 6 days of hard riding. They passed through territories controlled by other southern packs, and Viridian saw the stairs. The whispers. Wolves pointing at the females riding as warriors, at the mixed companies, at the former alpha-bound and humbled. Word of their revolution had spread faster than she'd anticipated. On the evening of the 6th day, they crested a hill and saw it. The Gathering Grounds. A vast natural amphitheater carved into the earth by ancient glaciers. Stone seats ringed a central platform, and 5 banners flew from poles at the cardinal points, the colors of a southern coalition. And surrounding the grounds were warriors.
Hundreds of them.
Maybe 1,000. They brought armies, Saren breathed. So did we, Rhiannon said, though her voice was tight. We just brought a different kind. They made camp outside the amphitheater that night, and Viridian barely slept. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed to hide enemies. When dawn finally came, she dressed in the clothes Maya had prepared, simple but elegant, the blue of the northern mountains mixed with the silver of moonlight. Not Luna's dress. A leader. Rhiannon wore black and silver, her armor polished to mirror brightness. Together they looked like opposite sides of the same coin, north and south, ice and fire, united in purpose. Ready? Rhiannon asked. Viridian thought of her father, of Frostborn Keep, of the alliance that had brought her here. She thought of the she-wolves she'd met, the ones who'd died fighting, the ones still learning to be free. No, she admitted, but let's do it anyway. They entered the amphitheater as the sun climbed, and Viridian felt the weight of 1,000 eyes upon them. The 5 alphas of the Southern Coalition sat on elevated thrones at the far end. They looked like Kale had, powerful, certain, absolutely convinced of their authority. But as Viridian walked toward them, head high and unafraid, she saw something flicker in their expressions. Uncertainty, because they'd expected rogues. Chaos. Easy targets. Instead, they saw an army of wolves who'd learned that submission was a choice, not a requirement. And wolves who'd stopped choosing submission were the most dangerous creatures alive. Alpha Soren of the Iron Ridge Pack spoke first. He was older than Kale had been, his beard more gray than black, but his voice carried the weight of authority. You stand accused of murder, treason, and the unlawful seizure of territory. How do you answer? Rhiannon stepped forward. We answer that Kale Nightshade lives. That we took no territory, we freed it. And that the only treason committed was against the she-wolves who were treated as property for 3 centuries. Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. The alphas exchanged glances. You admit to rebellion, then? Asked Alpha Kirin of the Blackwater Pack, younger and aggressive. To overturn legitimate authority. We admit to revolution, Viridian said, joining Rhiannon. There's a difference. Explain the difference, demanded Alpha Lennox of Stonecrest, his tone skeptical. Rebellion seeks to replace one tyrant with another, Viridian said. Revolution seeks to eliminate tyranny itself. We're not trying to seize power. We're trying to build something where power is shared. Shared, Soren repeated slowly. You mean between males and females? Among all wolves, Rhiannon corrected. Based on merit and choice, not gender and force. The amphitheater erupted in shouts, some of anger, some of disbelief. Alpha Tiernan of Blood Moon, scarred and fierce, slammed his hand on his throne. This is madness. You would upend 3 centuries of tradition, of natural order, because you're too weak to accept your place. No, said a new voice. Kale stepped forward, flanked by guards. The chains on his wrists rattled as he moved. Every eye in the amphitheater fixed on him. Kale Nightshade, Soren breathed. You live. I live, Kale confirmed. Though perhaps I shouldn't. Perhaps I should have died with the order I helped perfect. He looked at the assembled alphas. You want to know what happened in Shadowfen? I'll tell you. The system broke. The one we all inherited. The one we all maintained. It broke because it was built on a foundation of cruelty disguised as tradition. You were always strong, Kieran protested. Shadowfen was stable. Shadowfen was a prison, Kale interrupted. One I decorated beautifully, but a prison nonetheless. And prisons only hold as long as the captives forget they outnumber the guards. He gestured to Rhiannon. She remembered. They all remembered. And when they finally rose up, when they finally fought back, I realized something. He paused, and the amphitheater was utterly silent. I realized that true strength isn't making wolves submit. It's giving them reasons to stay willingly. That true order isn't forced silence. It's chosen cooperation. That every Luna I broke, every she-wolf I sent below, every time I wielded power through fear. His voice cracked. I was building my own destruction. Then you admit you were wrong, Soren said slowly. I admit I was a tyrant. Whether that makes me wrong depends on what you value more, comfortable lies or uncomfortable truth. Kale met each alpha's eyes in turn. Kill them if you want. Crush this rebellion. Maintain your comfortable order. But know that the next uprising will be worse. Because they've proven it's possible. And that knowledge, once born, cannot be killed. The silence stretched, stretched, stretched. Then Alpha Cassius of Riverbend, the 5th Alpha, who'd been quiet until now, stood. He was younger than the others, maybe 40, with thoughtful eyes. I have a question, he said. Not for the accused, but for my fellow Alphas. He looked around. When did we become the kind of wolves who celebrate obedience over loyalty? When did we start confusing silence with peace? Cassius, Tiernan warned. No, let me finish. We sit here, judging them for revolution, but none of us have asked the most important question. Were they right? He gestured to the she-wolves standing witness. Look at them. They're not rogues. They're not chaos. They're wolves who'd rather fight than continue living as less than what they are. And he looked at his fellow alphas. We're so afraid of losing power that we can't see the truth. What truth? Soren asked, his voice dangerous. That power without consent is just tyranny in nice clothes. That our mates smile at us not from love, but from fear. That our daughters watch us enforce these rules and learn to hate us. Cassius's voice grew passionate. I have 3 daughters. And when I look at them, I don't see wolves who need to be controlled. I see wolves who deserve to be free. The amphitheater erupted. Alphas shouting. Warriors arguing. The careful unity of the coalition fracturing before everyone's eyes. And in the chaos, Viridian caught Rhiannon's eye. They'd come expecting judgment. Instead, they'd sparked a civil war. Sometimes revolution wasn't loud. Sometimes it was one voice, speaking the truth, causing everything else to crumble. Chapter 10. The Fracture. The gathering descended into chaos. What had been a trial became a battleground of words and ideology. Alphas shouted at each other across the amphitheater while their warriors watched, uncertain whether to intervene or choose sides. She-wolves from the coalition packs, the mates, daughters, and sisters who'd been silent observers, now whispered among themselves, their eyes fixed on Viridian and Rhiannon with something that looked like hunger. Hunger for possibility. Soren attempted to restore order, his voice booming across the stone seats. Enough. We are the coalition. We do not fracture over the words of rebels and traitors. They're not traitors, Cassius interrupted, his voice cutting through the noise. They're revolutionaries. There's a difference. A difference that ends with our packs torn apart. Tiernan roared, his face flushed with rage. He pointed at Viridian and Rhiannon. You see what they've done? They've brought discord to the coalition. Divided us with pretty speeches about freedom and equality. This is exactly why females cannot be allowed power. They destabilize everything. Or perhaps, said a new voice, what they've destabilized was already rotten. Every head turned. A she-wolf stood from the riverbend section, not young, perhaps 50 winters, with silver-streaked hair and eyes like flint. She wore fine clothes that marked her as important, and when she moved forward, several other she-wolves rose with her. Alpha Cassius, Soren said, his voice a warning. Control your mate. My mate has a voice, Cassius replied, though his expression showed surprise. And I would hear it. Speak, Elora. The she-wolf, Elora, descended to the amphitheater floor with deliberate grace. Other she-wolves followed, a younger female from Stonecrest, 2 from Blackwater, even one from Tiernan's own Blood Moon pack. They moved to stand beside Viridian and Rhiannon, forming a line of females facing the 5 alphas. For 300 years, Elora said, her voice steady and clear, we have been silent. Not because we had nothing to say, but because speaking meant punishment. But these she-wolves, she gestured to the Moonshadow delegation. They spoke anyway. They fought. They won. And now you expect us to watch you crush them and return to our silence. Elora, Cassius began. No, husband. I love you. You've been kinder than most. But even you have never asked what I wanted, what I dreamed. What I might have become if I'd been given the choice to be more than a mate and mother. Her voice grew stronger. I'm done being silent. We all are. The she-wolves behind her murmured agreement. More rose from the seats, a trickle at first, then a flood. Dozens of females from all 5 coalition packs descended to the amphitheater floor. Viridian watched, her heart pounding. She hadn't planned this. Hadn't even imagined it was possible. But Rhiannon's revolution had sparked something that couldn't be contained anymore. The silence was breaking everywhere. This is sedition, Kieran snarled, rising from his throne. I'll not have my pack torn apart by female hysteria. Call it hysteria if that makes you feel better, snapped a young she-wolf from his pack. But we're not hysterical. We're done. Done pretending we're happy. Done accepting scraps when we deserve the same respect you give each other. The male warriors were growing restless now, hands moving to weapons. The tension in the amphitheater was explosive, one wrong word away from violence. Soren held up his hand, his face gravely. We will have order. Cassius, Lennox, you have not spoken. Where do you stand? Lennox of Stonecrest, middle-aged and calculating, studied the assembled she-wolves for a long moment. I stand for stability. For tradition. But, he paused. I also stand for strength. And I cannot deny that these she-wolves have shown remarkable strength. Perhaps there is a middle path. Reforms, not revolution. Reforms, Rhiannon said, her voice cutting across the space, are how tyrants stay in power while pretending to change. We tried reforms in Shadowfen. They failed because the system itself is poisonous. Then what do you propose? Lennox asked. Chaos? Every pack deciding for itself whether females have rights? The Southern Territories will tear themselves apart. Better torn apart than held together by chains, Viridian said. But we're not proposing chaos. We're proposing a choice. Let each pack decide. Let the she-wolves have a voice in that decision. If some packs want to maintain the old ways, and their females agree freely, not from fear, but from genuine choice, then so be it. And if they choose freedom? Tiernan demanded. If every she-wolf follows your example, what happens to the pack hierarchy? To order? To the very foundations of our society. Then maybe, said Kale quietly, still standing in his chains, those foundations needed to crumble. Because they were built on subjugation. The amphitheater fell silent. Kale speaking against the system he'd embodied was shocking enough. But his words carried weight precisely because of who he'd been. If even he could admit the truth, who could deny it? Soren looked older suddenly, the weight of leadership pressing down on him. This gathering is suspended. The alphas will convene privately to discuss our path forward. Guards, escort the delegates back to their camps. No one leaves the gathering grounds until we've reached a decision. Which means what, exactly? Rhiannon asked. That we're prisoners? It means, Soren said heavily, that if I let you leave now, half the coalition will follow you, and the other half will try to kill you. So yes, you're prisoners. For your own protection and ours. They were escorted back to their camp under heavy guard, not hostile, but watchful. The she-wolves who'd stood with them in the amphitheater were similarly escorted back to their respective packs, though Viridian saw them exchanging looks, hand signals, and whispered promises. The revolution was spreading. That went better than expected. Maya said once they were secured in their camp, guards posted at every entrance. And worse. Better because we didn't die immediately, Saren agreed. Worse because now we've sparked a civil war within the coalition. Not a civil war, Rhiannon corrected. A reckoning. They've been avoiding this conversation for centuries. We just forced them to have it. Viridian sat by the fire, exhaustion pulling at her bones. Around her, the Moonshadow wolves were tense, weapons close, ready for violence. But there was also something else in their expressions. Hope, maybe, or at least the possibility of it. Do you think the alphas will actually negotiate? Neve asked, bringing Viridian tea. Or are they just buying time to coordinate an attack? Both probably, Vance said, joining them. Soren is pragmatic. He'll want to find a solution that maintains some of his authority while preventing outright rebellion. Cassius is clearly sympathetic. Lennox is calculating risks and benefits. But Kieran and Tiernan? He shook his head. They'll push you to crush you completely. 3-2 then, Viridian said. Not great odds. Unless Lennox sides with the reformers. Then it's 3-2 in our favor. Vance warmed his hands at the fire. Everything depends on what happens in that private meeting. No, Cale said, emerging from his guarded tent. His chains clinked as he moved to the fire, and guards tensed, but Rhiannon waved them back. Everything depends on what happens among the she-wolves. The alphas can decide whatever they want, but if the females of every pack start demanding change, no decree will stop it. You're helping us now? Saren asked suspiciously. Why? Because I'm not an idiot. I see which way the wind is blowing. Cale settled onto a log, looking more tired than dangerous. And because Viridian was right, the system was already crumbling. Better to guide its fall than be crushed beneath it. How generous, Rhiannon said acidly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm offering perspective. Cale looked at Viridian. The alphas are meeting to discuss terms, yes. But they're also terrified. You've done what no one thought possible. You've given their females hope. Hope is more dangerous than any weapon. Then we need to nurture that hope, Alora said, appearing at the edge of the camp. 2 guards followed her, but she waved them off. May I enter? Rhiannon nodded, and the older she-wolf joined them at the fire. The other she-wolves who stood with you, we've been talking, passing messages between camps. Alora's eyes gleamed in the firelight. We want to propose something to our alphas. A compromise that might prevent war, while still advancing our cause. I'm listening, Viridian said. Each pack holds a vote. Every wolf, male and female, gets a voice. They vote on whether to maintain the old ways or adopt new ones. Majority rules, but those in the minority aren't forced to stay. They can leave peacefully, join other packs that better suit their values. You're proposing voluntary segregation, Vance said slowly. Traditional packs and progressive packs, both existing side by side. Is that even possible? Saren asked. Won't the traditional packs just try to destroy the progressive ones? Not if we establish treaties, Alora said. Non-aggression pacts between packs, regardless of their internal structure. Trade agreements. Share defense against external threats. We don't have to agree on everything to coexist. Rhiannon frowned. It's not perfect. It still leaves some she-wolves trapped in oppressive systems. But trapped by choice, Alora countered. If a she-wolf truly wants to live in a traditional pack, who are we to tell her she can't? And if she changes her mind later, she knows progressive packs exist. She knows escape is possible. It's more than we have now, Maya said thoughtfully. And it gives the alphas a way to save face. They're not being forced to change, they're allowing their packs to decide. Viridian looked around at the assembled wolves. What do you think? Is this compromise worth pursuing? It's not what I wanted, Saren admitted. I wanted total liberation. All she-wolves free immediately. But revolutions don't work that way, Kale said quietly. Real change takes generations. You plant seeds and hope they grow. This compromise plants seeds in every pack. I agree, Vance said. It's strategic, and it prevents a war we might not win. One by one, the others nodded. Not enthusiastically, but with grim acceptance that perfect victory wasn't possible. Then we present it to the alphas, Viridian said. Tomorrow, when they reconvene. We offer compromise, but we don't back down on the core principle. She-wolves deserve choice. That's non-negotiable. That night, Viridian couldn't sleep. She walked the perimeter of the camp, nodding to guards, checking on wolves who were too anxious to rest. The moon was waning now, but still bright enough to cast shadows. She found Rhiannon at the camp's edge, staring out at the coalition banners in the distance. Thinking about what comes next? Viridian asked, joining her. Thinking about what we've lost to get here. Rhiannon's voice was soft. 23 wolves died in the battle for Shadowfen. More were wounded. And for what? So we could come here and beg the coalition for scraps. It's not begging. It's negotiating. It feels like begging. Rhiannon turned to face her. I spent 3 years in the wilderness, building a pack of rogues. We were free, Viridian. Completely free. And now we're compromising that freedom so the coalition feels comfortable. But what about the she-wolves still trapped? Viridian asked gently. The ones in the other packs who don't have the strength to escape like you did? Don't we owe them a path to freedom, even if it's slower than we'd like? Rhiannon was silent for a long time. Then, sometimes I forget you were only a Luna for a few months. You think like someone who's been leading for years. I think like someone who's terrified of failing all the wolves who trusted me, Viridian corrected. Every decision feels like balancing on a knife edge. Too aggressive and we all die. Too passive and we betray everything we fought for. Welcome to leadership. Rhiannon smiled grimly. It doesn't get easier. Comforting. They stood together, watching the distant camps, knowing that tomorrow would determine the fate of every she-wolf in the Southern Territories. The alphas reconvened at midday. This time, the atmosphere was different. The 5 leaders looked tired, their unity clearly strained. Soren's expression was carefully neutral. Cassius looked hopeful. Lennox remained calculating. But Kieran and Tiernan radiated barely contained fury. We have discussed your revolution, Soren said, the word clearly distasteful. And we have reached a decision. Of sorts. 3-2, Kieran spat. This is not a consensus. No, Cassius agreed. But it is democracy. Something we should have been practicing all along. Soren continued. We propose a conditional peace. Each pack of the coalition will hold a vote. Every wolf, male and female, will have a voice. If a majority supports maintaining traditional structure, that pack continues as before. If a majority supports reform, they may restructure however they see fit. Minority wolves may leave peacefully to join packs more aligned with their values. And Moonshadow? Rhiannon asked, is recognized as an independent pack. You will maintain your territory, your autonomy, but you must swear to uphold the peace. No more instigating rebellions. No more recruiting from other packs. You exist as an example, not as evangelists. Those are acceptable terms, Viridian said, glancing at Rhiannon, who nodded reluctantly. However, Tiernan interjected, his voice hard. There are conditions. You must release Kale, Nightshade. If you're truly about justice and choice, prove it. Let him choose where he goes, freedom, exile, or remaining with Moonshadow. The demand was clever, Viridian realized. If they refused, they looked like hypocrites. If they agreed, they risked releasing someone dangerous. She looked at Kale, who'd been standing silent through the proceedings. What do you choose? Kale seemed surprised to be asked. He looked at the alphas, at the coalition wolves watching, at Rhiannon who'd once been his mate and was now his judge. I choose, he said slowly, to return to Moonshadow. Not as alpha. Not even as a free wolf. But as someone serving penance. Learning what I never understood. If you'll have me. The amphitheater erupted in gasps and arguments. Unacceptable, Kieran said. He should be freed or executed, not made into some symbolic prisoner. Why? Rhiannon asked coldly. Afraid that seeing him humbled might give your own she-wolves ideas? The question hung in the air, and Kieran had no good answer. I accept his choice, Rhiannon said. He'll return to Moonshadow. He'll work alongside she-wolves he once oppressed. He'll witness the building of something better. And maybe he'll actually learn something. Soren looked between them, then at his fellow alphas. Then it's decided. The coalition accepts these terms. Peace is established, conditional on all parties honoring the agreement. The votes will be held within each pack over the next month. We reconvene in 6 weeks to formalize the results. Agreed, Viridian said. Agreed, echoed the other alphas, though Kieran and Tiernan said it through gritted teeth. As the gathering formally ended, as wolves began to disperse, Viridian felt the weight of what they'd accomplished settle over her. They hadn't won everything. The revolution was incomplete. But they'd won something crucial. The right to exist. The right to be different. The right to choose. And choice, once granted, could never truly be taken back. The journey home took 7 days, but it felt shorter somehow. The Moonshadow wolves traveled with lighter hearts, even knowing the work ahead was immense. On the 5th day, they passed a caravan heading south, a mixed group of she-wolves and a few males, all bearing packs and determined expressions. Where are you headed? Rhiannon called to them. Moonshadow, the lead she-wolf replied. If you'll have us. We heard there's a pack where females can be warriors, where choice matters more than tradition. Rhiannon and Viridian exchanged glances. This was happening everywhere now, Viridian realized. She-wolves making the choice to leave. Males who believed in equality joined them. The revolution wasn't over. It was just beginning. Follow us home, Viridian said. There's room for all who choose freedom. As they crested the final hill and saw the citadel, no longer called Shadowfen but Moonshadow, its banners changed from black and red to silver and blue, Viridian felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Not just hope. Not just relief.
Pride.
They'd done it. Against impossible odds, against centuries of tradition, against every system designed to break them. They'd done it. They'd survived. They'd fought. They'd won. And now came the hardest part, building something worthy of the sacrifices made to get here. Chapter 11. Building from Ashes. 6 weeks after the gathering, Moonshadow had transformed from a territory to something approaching a true pack. The citadel no longer looked like Kale's fortress. She-wolves had torn down the monuments to obedience, replaced the oppressive tapestries with simple banners bearing Moonshadow's new symbol, a silver wolf running free beneath a crescent moon. The silence chambers had been filled with rubble and sealed permanently, a cairn built above them to honor those who'd suffered below. But the physical changes were nothing compared to the social ones. Viridian stood in what had once been the Great Hall, now the council chamber, watching wolves arrive for the morning assembly. This was their new tradition. Every day at dawn, any wolf could present concerns, propose ideas, or request assistance. Leadership rotated weekly between 5 wolves elected by the pack: Viridian, Rhiannon, Maya, Vance, and a young rogue named Briar, who'd proven herself during the revolution. Democracy was loud, messy, and frustrating. It was also exhilarating. We need to discuss the southern border, Vance was saying, pointing to a map spread across the long table. Blood Moon Pack has been testing our defenses. Nothing aggressive yet, just patrols coming close to our territory markers. Tiernan never accepted the treaty, Rhiannon said. She looked tired. They all did. Building a new society was exhausting work. He's probably hoping we'll fail, so he can claim we violated the peace terms. Then we don't give him the satisfaction, Maya said. We reinforce the border, but we don't provoke. Show strength without aggression. Agreed, Viridian said, making notes. What else? The refugees, Briar spoke up. She'd become their unofficial liaison to the constant stream of wolves arriving from other territories. We've had 47 new arrivals this week alone. Mostly she-wolves, but also some males who disagree with their birth pack's votes. The votes, Saren said, entering with a handful of dispatches. Results are coming in from across the coalition. Riverbend voted for reform, 73% in favor. Stonecrest voted to maintain tradition, 62%. Blackwater is split almost perfectly down the middle and descending into chaos. Viridian rubbed her temples. The coalition votes had revealed deep divisions within every pack. Some were handling it peacefully. Others were not. Blackwater's Alpha sent a request for mediators, Saren continued. They're on the verge of civil war. They're asking if we'll help negotiate a peaceful split. We're not exactly neutral, Rhiannon pointed out. No, but we've done what they're trying to do, restructure, without mass bloodshed. Mostly. Vance looked at Viridian. It's your rotation as lead. Your call. Viridian looked around the table at wolves who'd become something more than allies. They'd become her council, her friends, her pack in the truest sense. We help, she decided. We send a small delegation, 3 wolves, a mixed group. Maya, you've got diplomatic experience. Vance, you understand traditional pack dynamics.
And
She paused.
Kale.
The name still sent ripples of discomfort through the room. Are you certain? Maya asked carefully. He understands how traditional alphas think. And seeing him working with us, taking orders from she-wolves, might be more persuasive than any words we speak. Viridian met her eyes. Besides, he asked for help. Let's see if he means it. Kale had been complicated. True to his word, he'd remained at Moonshadow as a working member of the pack rather than a prisoner. His chains had been removed after the first week, though guards still watched him carefully. He worked alongside she-wolves in the kitchens, the gardens, and the reconstruction projects. He attended council meetings, but never spoke unless asked. He was trying. Whether it was genuine redemption or strategic survival, Viridian couldn't tell yet. She found him in the library, once his private domain, now open to all. He was helping Neve catalog books, creating an inventory of knowledge that would be accessible to every wolf who could read. We're sending you to Blackwater, Viridian said without preamble. They need help negotiating a peaceful split. You'll go with Maya and Vance. Kale looked up, surprise flickering across his face. You trust me to represent Moonshadow? I trust you to want Moonshadow to succeed. For your own survival, if nothing else. Viridian leaned against a bookshelf. But I also think you're uniquely positioned to speak to traditional alphas. To explain how you changed, why you changed. They might listen to you in ways they won't listen to us. And if I betray you, use this opportunity to turn Blackwater against Moonshadow. Then you'll prove I was wrong to give you a chance. And you'll have to live with that. She held his gaze. But I don't think you will.
I think you meant what you said at the gathering.
That you see which way the wind is blowing. Kale set down the book he'd been holding. You're either very wise or very foolish. I haven't decided which. Neither have I, Viridian admitted. But we're building something new here. Something that requires taking risks on wolves who might not deserve them. If we only trust the trustworthy, we'll never grow beyond our small circle. Even revolutionaries need pragmatism. Especially revolutionaries. She pushed off from the bookshelf. You leave tomorrow at dawn. Pack light. And Kale? She paused at the door. Don't make me regret this. I'll try not to, he said softly. And for once, she thought he might actually mean it. While the delegation prepared for Blackwater, Viridian dealt with another crisis. The Forgotten. The she-wolves freed from the silence chambers were slowly recovering, but progress was uneven. Some, like a young wolf named Cleo, had regained their voices and were integrating into pack life. Others remained locked in their own heads, unable or unwilling to reconnect with the world. Sage had converted one of the Citadel's wings into a healing center where the forgotten could recover at their own pace. Viridian visited most days, sitting with she-wolves who couldn't speak, reading to them, just being present. Today she found a new arrival, a she-wolf from Stonecrest who'd escaped after their vote-maintained tradition. She was perhaps 30, with hollow eyes and scars around her wrists where chains had worn through skin. Her name is Isolde, Sage said quietly. She hasn't spoken since she arrived. Just sit and stare. Viridian approached slowly, settling onto the floor across from the traumatized she-wolf. She didn't speak at first, just sat in companionable silence. Sometimes that was enough. After a long while, Isolde's eyes focused on Viridian. Is it real? She whispered, her voice raw from disuse. Is that real?
This.
Freedom.
Choice.
A pack where she-wolves aren't. She couldn't finish. It's real, Viridian said firmly. I promise you, it's real. Isolde's face crumpled, and she began to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that sounded like years of suppressed anguish finally finding release. Viridian moved closer, offering presence but not touch. Some wolves needed space to break. Sage appeared with warm tea and blankets. Other forgotten gathered around, forming a protective circle. They understood in ways that wolves who'd never been broken couldn't. You're safe now, whispered Cleo, who'd regained enough of herself to help others. You made it. You survived. But who am I now? Isolde asked through tears. They took so much. How do I find what's left? One day at a time, Sage said gently. One moment of choosing yourself. It gets easier. Slowly, but it does. Viridian stayed until Isolde's tears subsided, until she fell into exhausted sleep. This was the other side of revolution, not the dramatic battles, but the quiet work of healing, of helping broken wolves remember they were more than what had been done to them. It would take years, decades maybe, but it was the most important work they could do. The delegation returned from Blackwater after 5 days, and the news was mixed. We helped them negotiate a split, Vance reported to the assembled council. About 40% of the pack chose to leave, mostly she-wolves and progressive males. They're establishing a new territory to the west, maintaining ties with Blackwater for trade, but governing independently. And the traditional faction? Rhiannon asked. Agreed to the separation peacefully, but there's a lot of bitterness. We'll need to watch that border. Vance paused. But the mediation worked. They kept calling it the Moonshadow model, peaceful division rather than civil war. What about Kale? Viridian asked. How did he do? Maya and Vance exchanged glances. Better than expected, Maya said. He spoke to their alpha privately. Whatever he said, it made a difference. The alpha agreed to let his wolves choose without punishment. He told him the truth, Kale said, entering the council chamber. He looked exhausted, but somehow lighter. About what I'd built, what it cost, how it fell, and I told him that fighting the inevitable only makes the fall harder. Poetic, Saren said dryly. Practical, Kale corrected. Change is coming to all the southern packs whether they want it or not. The only question is whether they adapt or break. He looked at Viridian. You were right to send me. I needed to see it through their eyes. To understand how terrifying this is for wolves who've spent their entire lives believing in the old ways. And, Viridian prompted, and I understand both sides now. The fear that comes with change. The pain that comes with stagnation. Neither is easy, but only one has hope. He took his usual seat at the council table, at the far end, a position of service rather than power. What else needs doing? It was a small moment, easily missed. But Viridian noted it, Kale asking what the pack needed rather than declaring what should be done. Maybe redemption was possible after all. That evening, Viridian found herself in the gardens, now wild and beautiful, flowers blooming in chaotic profusion. She'd been drawn here often lately, finding peace in the transformation from Kale's rigid control to natural abundance. Rhiannon found her there, carrying 2 cups of Maya's specialty. "You've been quiet today," Rhiannon observed, settling beside her on a stone bench. "Just thinking about how much has changed." "How much hasn't?" Viridian accepted the tea gratefully. "We've rebuilt the pack structure, freed the she-wolves, and established peace with the coalition. There always will be. That's the nature of progress. It's never finished." Rhiannon sipped her tea. "But look what we've accomplished in 6 weeks. 47 new refugees integrated. 2 successful mediations with other packs. 0 she-wolves are punished for speaking their minds. That's not nothing. It's not everything either. Blood Moon is still testing our borders. Stonecrest is becoming more hardline, not less. And within Moonshadow itself, there are tensions. The rogues still don't fully trust the reformed Shadowfen wolves. Some of the older she-wolves want faster change. Others think we're moving too fast." "Welcome to leadership," Rhiannon said with a tired smile. "You'll never please everyone. The trick is staying true to core principles while remaining flexible on details." "And what are our core principles?" Viridian asked.
Choice. Equality.
"Freedom. Everything else is negotiable." Rhiannon looked up at the moon, waxing toward full again. "You know what I realized the other day? We're not building Shadowfen again. We're building something that's never existed before. A pack with no template, no blueprint, no historical precedent. That's either inspiring or terrifying."
Both.
"Definitely both." They sat in comfortable silence until Neve appeared, looking worried. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a messenger at the gates. From the north. From Frostborn." Viridian's heart jumped. She'd sent letters to her father, but received no response. She'd assumed he was either too disappointed in the revolution to reply, or coalition politics made communication dangerous. "Send them in," she said, standing. The messenger was a young male wolf she recognized, Finnick, one of her father's guards. He looked travel-worn and serious. "Finnick," Viridian said warmly. "It's good to see you. How is my father?" "Worried about you, Luna, I mean Viridian." Finnick pulled out a sealed letter. "He sent me as soon as he heard about the coalition vote. He wanted to make sure you were safe." Viridian broke the seal and read, "My dearest daughter, news of your revolution has reached the north. I won't lie, I'm shocked by what you've accomplished. When I sent you south for alliance, I never imagined you'd topple an alpha and remake an entire society. I'm also proud. So incredibly proud. Your mother would have loved this. She always said you had her fire. I just didn't realize how much until you decided to burn down centuries of tradition. The North watches what you're building with great interest. Some of our she-wolves are already talking about the Moonshadow model, wondering if we need reforms too. You've started something that won't be contained by borders. Stay safe. Stay strong. And know that if you ever need us, Frostborn stands ready to support you. Your loving father, Alpha Gareth." Viridian read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. She'd been so focused on survival, on building Moonshadow, that she hadn't let herself think about what her father might feel. Whether he'd see her as a daughter who'd succeeded or a failure who destroyed his careful alliance. But he was proud. He understood. "There's more," Finnick said. "I'm not just a messenger. Your father sent me to establish formal relations between Frostborn and Moonshadow. He wants an alliance, not the forced kind, but a real one, between equals." "The coalition won't like that," Vance warned. "A northern pack allying with a southern rebel territory? That could destabilize everything." "Or it could stabilize things," Rhiannon countered. "If Frostborn recognizes Moonshadow as legitimate, other northern packs might follow. We'd have allies beyond the coalition's reach. Which means if the coalition ever decides to break the treaty." Viridian said slowly. "We wouldn't be alone," Rhiannon finished. Viridian looked at the letter again, at her father's carefully chosen words. He wasn't just offering support. He was offering legitimacy, recognition that what they'd built deserved to stand alongside traditional packs. "Tell my father yes," she said to Finnick. Moonshadow accepts Frostborn's alliance with gratitude and friendship. He'll be pleased. Finnick smiled. Also, he asked me to tell you that Maya, your handmaiden from the north, her sister still serves your father. She sends her love and says she always knew you'd do something extraordinary. Maya, who'd been listening quietly, gasped. Ira? She's well. Thriving. Your sister is quite proud of what you and your daughter accomplished. Tears filled Maya's eyes. I haven't seen her in 5 years. Since I came south to serve in Shadowfen. Your father has extended an invitation to the entire Moonshadow leadership, Finnick continued. He'd like to host you at Frostborn Keep, to celebrate the alliance and show the North what you've built. A diplomatic visit, Vance said thoughtfully. That could be powerful. Show the world that Moonshadow isn't just surviving but thriving. It could also be a trap, Saren warned. We'd be far from home, vulnerable. My father wouldn't betray me, Viridian said firmly. Then, with a smile, but he does love a dramatic gesture. Hosting the revolutionary pack that toppled Shadowfen? The Northern Alphas will talk about nothing else for months. Then we accept, Rhiannon decided. We need allies. And showing strength through diplomacy is as important as showing strength through defense. Viridian looked around at her council, rogues and reformed warriors, she-wolves and males, old and young all working together. 6 weeks ago, they'd been revolutionaries fighting for survival. Now they were becoming something more, a legitimate pack, earning recognition and respect. Then let's show the North what revolution looks like, she said. Let's show them that wolves can choose freedom and survive. That night, Viridian stood on her balcony one last time before sleep, looking out over Moonshadow territory. Lights glowed in windows throughout the citadel. Guards walked patrols, she-wolves and males working together. In the training yards, wolves sparred under the moonlight, learning to fight as equals rather than as dominants and submissives. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still wolves who struggled with the changes, still threats lurking at their borders. But it was real. It was growing. It was alive. And for the first time since arriving in the South, Viridian felt something she'd almost forgotten. Peace. Not the false peace of submission. Not the fragile peace of repression. But real peace, the kind that comes from building something worth protecting. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Neve. Couldn't sleep? Viridian asked. Too excited, Neve admitted. Going to the North, seeing where you came from, meeting your father. It's like a dream. It's diplomatic work. There will be formal dinners and boring negotiations. And freedom, Neve said. Real freedom. The kind where I can walk through a great hall without fear. Where I can speak without checking over my shoulder. Where I'm just a wolf. Viridian pulled the younger she-wolf into a hug. You've always been just a wolf. You just had to remember it. You helped me remember. You and Rhiannon and Maya and all the others who refused to forget what we were meant to be. Neve pulled back, smiling. I'm going to tell my children about this someday. About the revolution. About how we broke our chains and built something beautiful from the rubble. Tell them it was messy, Viridian said. Tell them it was hard. Tell them it cost more than we wanted to pay. But tell them it was worth it. Every scar. Neve asked, touching the faint marks on Viridian's back where Kale's whip had struck. Every scar, Viridian confirmed. Because they're proof we survived. And survival, for wolves who were meant to be broken, is the greatest rebellion of all. They stood together under the moon, 2 she-wolves who'd been silent and were now finding their voices, looking out over a pack that shouldn't exist but did. And in the distance, carried on the night wind, came the sound of howling. Not the regimented calls of Shadowfen's past, but wild, chaotic, beautiful howling. Wolves celebrating freedom in the only language that mattered. The language of choice. Chapter 12, Northern Winds. The journey to Frostborn Keep took 12 days through terrain that transformed from southern hills to northern mountains. With each mile closer to home, Viridian felt something shift in her chest, anticipation mixed with apprehension. She was returning differently from when she'd left, changed in ways her father might not recognize. The delegation was smaller than what they'd taken to the gathering. Only 20 wolves, carefully chosen to represent Moonshadow's diversity. Rhiannon rode beside Viridian at the front, both wearing traveling leathers that marked them as warriors rather than decorative lunas. Behind them came Maya, Neve, Saren, Vance, and surprisingly, Kale. "Are you certain bringing him was wise?" Saren had asked on the first day. "Your father might see it as an insult, bringing the alpha, who is supposed to be your mate." "My father will see it as proof," Viridian had replied, "that we're not just preaching change, but living it. That even wolves who embodied the old ways can learn new ones." Now, as they crested the final ridge and Frostborn Keep came into view, Viridian's breath caught. The gray stone walls, the towers crowned with ice, the banners bearing her family's crest, it all looked exactly as she remembered and completely different at once. She was seeing it through new eyes. Eyes that had witnessed oppression and revolution, that had learned the difference between tradition and tyranny. "It's beautiful," Rhiannon said softly. "Cold, but beautiful. I can see why you missed it." "I wasn't sure I'd ever see it again," Viridian admitted. "When I left for Shadowfen, I thought I was leaving forever." "You were," Maya said from behind them. "The Viridian who left here died in Shadowfen. The wolf returning is someone new." The gates opened before they reached them, and Viridian saw her father standing in the courtyard, flanked by his beta and senior warriors. But she also saw something else. Dozens of she-wolves standing among the males, not behind them. Some even wore weapons. Frostborn had changed too. Gareth stepped forward as Viridian dismounted, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other. His beard was more gray than she remembered. New lines marked his face, but his eyes held the same warmth they always had. "Father," she said, her voice catching. "Little Wolf," he replied, using the childhood nickname. Then he pulled her into a fierce embrace, and Viridian felt 5 months of tension finally release. "I'm so sorry," he whispered against her hair. "I sent you into hell thinking it was an alliance." "You sent me into hell," she agreed, pulling back to look at him. "And I burned it down and built something better from the ashes." He laughed, the sound wet with tears. "That's my daughter. Your mother would have done the same." "I hope so. I tried to remember what she taught me, about being strong without being cruel, about leadership meaning service, not dominance." "She taught you well." Gareth turned to the rest of the delegation. "Welcome to Frostborn, all of you. You honor us with your presence." Rhiannon Nightshade. He approached her with respect. "Your story has reached even the north. You're a legend here." "Legends are usually dead," Rhiannon said dryly. "I prefer to remain breathing." "Then we'll work to keep you that way." His eyes found Kale, and his expression hardened.
"And you?"
"The Alpha, who claimed my daughter." Kale dismounted and, to everyone's surprise, dropped to one knee. "Alpha Gareth, I have no defense for what I did to your daughter. To the she-wolves of Shadowfen. I can only offer my life in service to building something better. If you wish to execute me for my crimes, I will accept that judgment." The courtyard went silent. Warriors' hands moved to weapons. Viridian tensed, ready to intervene if her father decided to take Kale's offer. But Gareth studied Kale for a long moment, then said, "Stand up. If my daughter has chosen to let you live, to let you help build her new pack, then I trust her judgment. But know this, if you ever harm another she-wolf, there won't be chains or prisons. Only death. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, Alpha." Kale rose, meeting his eyes, and welcomed. "Come," Gareth said, turning to lead them inside. "We've prepared chambers for all of you. Tonight we feast. Tomorrow we will talk about politics. But today you rest." The chambers they'd prepared for Viridian were her old rooms, preserved exactly as she'd left them. Seeing them brought a flood of memories, training with wooden swords, reading by the fire, dreaming of adventure while knowing duty would claim her eventually. She'd gotten more adventure than she'd ever imagined. Neve helped her change for the evening feast, choosing a dress that blended northern and southern styles, Rich blue wool with silver embroidery, practical yet elegant. Your father loves you very much, Neve observed. I can see it in how he looks at you. Like you're the moon itself. He's a good alpha. A good father. I'm lucky. Viridian touched the moonstone pendant at her throat, her mother's necklace, the one she'd worn through everything. I hope he understands what we're trying to build. That it's not rejection of the North, but expansion of its values. I think he already does. Did you see the she-wolves in the courtyard? Some were armed. That's new, isn't it? Very new. Father always allowed female warriors, but they were rare. Volunteers, not the norm. Viridian smiled. Maybe our revolution is spreading faster than we thought. A knock came at the door. Come in, Viridian called. Her father entered, carrying something wrapped in cloth. I wanted to give you this privately before the feast. He unwrapped it to reveal a sword, beautiful, perfectly balanced, with a moonstone set in the pommel. This was your mother's, he said. She carried it in every battle. I was saving it for when you became Luna officially. But I think this is more appropriate. Viridian took the sword, feeling its weight, its rightness in her hand. Father, I'm not Luna anymore. Not in the traditional sense.
No.
You're something better. A leader who chose her path rather than having it chosen for her. He touched the moonstone. Your mother would be so proud. She always said the greatest strength was knowing when to stand and when to fight. You've done both. Did she ever regret it? Viridian asked. Marrying you for alliance? Giving up whatever life she might have had otherwise. She told me once that she chose me every day. That yes, the alliance brought us together, but what we built afterward was a choice. He smiled sadly. We had 17 years before the fever took her. 17 years of partnership, not dominance. I hope she was happy. She was, Viridian said softly. I remember. She smiled more than any Luna I've met since. Then let's honor her memory by making sure more she-wolves get to smile freely. He kissed her forehead.
Come.
The feast awaits. And I want you to meet some wolves who've been inspired by your revolution. The feast was unlike any Viridian had experienced in the South. The great hall was warm and loud, filled with laughter and argument and the clatter of dishes. But what struck her most was the integration. She-wolves and males sitting together, talking freely, no one relegated to standing along the walls. We've made some changes, Gareth said as he led her to the high table. After hearing what happened in Shadowfen, our own she-wolves started asking questions. Why couldn't they speak in council? Why were there so few female warriors? Why did tradition trump choice? And you listened, Viridian said, impressed. I remembered your mother. How she chafed at limitations even while accepting them. How she'd wanted more for you than what tradition offered. He gestured to the assembled pack. So we voted. Like your moon shadow model. 78% wanted reforms. The rest were given the option to leave peacefully. Most stayed. Father, that's incredible. It's necessary. The world is changing, little wolf. We can change with it or be swept away. He raised his cup. To Moonshadow. And to the she-wolves who refused to remain silent. The hall erupted in cheers. Cups were raised, hulls echoed off the vaulted ceiling, and for the first time since leaving the South, Viridian felt completely safe. Throughout the feast, Northern wolves approached the Moonshadow delegation, asking questions, sharing stories, seeking advice. A young she-wolf wanted to know how to become a warrior. An older male asked how to unlearn behaviors he'd been taught since childhood. A mother wondered how to raise her daughter in this new world where anything seemed possible. Viridian answered them all as best she could, but she noticed someone else was drawing equal attention. Rhiannon. The silver wolf had become a legend in both North and South. The Luna who'd escaped, survived, and returned to topple her oppressor. She-wolves looked at her with something close to worship. It's uncomfortable, Rhiannon admitted when they found a moment alone on the balcony. Being treated like a hero when I just did what I had to do to survive. That's what makes you a hero, Viridian said. You didn't set out to start a revolution. You just refused to die quietly. but your survival showed others it was possible. And now they want me to be some kind of symbol. The perfect revolutionary. Rhiannon laughed bitterly. If they knew how scared I was, how many times I almost gave up, how many mistakes I made, they'd see you as even more inspiring. Because you're real.
Flawed.
Mortal. Viridian leaned against the railing. Perfect heroes are easy to worship and impossible to emulate. But a she-wolf who's terrified and fights anyway? That's someone anyone can be. Before Rhiannon could respond, Maya joined them, her face glowing with joy. Ira is here. My sister. I haven't seen her in 5 years and she's here, and she laughed through tears. She's proud of me. Of us. Of everything we've done. Then go be with her, Viridian said warmly. Family first. Always. After Maya left, Viridian and Rhiannon stood in comfortable silence, watching the northern stars paint the sky. Do you think this is real? Rhiannon asked. Or are we in the calm before another storm? Both, probably. There are still wolves who oppose us. Still dangers lurking. But this moment right now, this is real. Viridian smiled. We should enjoy it while we can. The next 3 days were filled with diplomatic meetings, treaty negotiations, and endless discussions about how to support each other's reforms while respecting each pack's autonomy. But it was the 4th day that changed everything. Viridian was meeting with her father and several northern alphas, leaders of smaller packs who'd come to Frostborn to learn about the Moonshadow model, when a messenger burst in, bleeding and wild-eyed. Blood Moon, he gasped. They've attacked. Breached Moonshadow's southern border with 300 warriors. The pack is under siege. Viridian's blood turned to ice. When? 2 days ago. We rode, without stopping to bring word. They're holding but barely. Alpha Tiernan said. The messenger swallowed. He said he's cleansing the south of weakness. That all progressive packs will fall. The room erupted in chaos. Questions, accusations, demands for action. But Viridian heard none of it. Her mind was already calculating distances, forces, what could be done. We need to go back, she said, cutting through the noise.
Now.
Every warrior we brought, plus anyone else who'll volunteer. That's not enough, Gareth said. 300 Blood Moon warriors are seasoned fighters. You'd be riding to your deaths. Then we die defending what we built, Viridian said fiercely. I won't abandon them. You won't have to. Her father's expression hardened with resolve. Frostborn stands with Moonshadow. I'll send 200 warriors. And I'll call on every northern pack that's allied with us. We'll march south together. The coalition, one of the other alphas, protested. Can object all they want. Blood Moon broke the treaty first. They attacked an allied pack during peace. That gives us the right to respond. Gareth looked at Viridian. We leave within the hour. Can you ride fast? I can fly if that's what it takes. Within 30 minutes, they'd assembled a force of nearly 400 wolves, 200 from Frostborn, 50 from the Moonshadow delegation, and another 150 volunteers from other northern packs who'd come for the Alliance celebration and stayed for the war. Rhiannon found Viridian in the armory, strapping on armor. This is going to be bloody. I know. We might lose. Even with the northern reinforcements, Blood Moon is strong. And they've had 2 days to establish their siege. I know. And you're going anyway. I have to. Those are my wolves. My pack. My responsibility. Viridian secured the final strap and picked up her mother's sword. I won't let them die alone. Then we ride together. Rhiannon clasped her forearm in the warrior's grip. Alpha and Alpha. Leading our wolves home. I'm not an alpha, Viridian started to protest. Yes, you are. You just lead differently. Rhiannon smiled grimly. Now let's go show Tiernan what happens when you attack wolves who've already won one revolution. The second one comes easier. They rode hard, stopping only to rest the horses and catch a few hours of sleep. The northern warriors proved their mettle, keeping pace without complaint despite the brutal schedule. On the 3rd day, they began to see signs of battle, smoke on the horizon, refugees fleeing north with stories of burning villages and brutal fighting. Tiernan's not just attacking the citadel, Vance reported after questioning survivors. He's razing everything. Says he's purging corruption from the south. He's terrified, Cale said quietly. That's what this is. He saw what happened in Shadowfen, saw it spreading to other packs, and panicked. He's trying to destroy the idea before it destroys him. Then let's show him that ideas don't die with fire, Viridian said. They spread it. On the fourth day, they reached the ridge overlooking Moonshadow territory. What Viridian saw made her heart sink. The citadel still stood, but barely. Sections of the walls had been breached. Fires burned throughout the grounds. And surrounding it completely were Blood Moon warriors, their siege equipment pounding the defenses. But even from this distance, Viridian could see Moonshadow fighting back. Warriors on the walls, firing arrows. Small groups making raids on the siege lines. They were outnumbered and outmatched, but they were refusing to surrender. They've held for 4 days, Gareth said with admiration. That's remarkable. They're fighting for something Blood Moon warriors can't understand, Rhiannon said.
Choice.
Freedom. The right to exist. That makes them stronger than their numbers suggest. But they can't hold much longer, Vance observed. The eastern wall is close to collapse. Once Blood Moon breaches there, it's over. Then we hit them before that happens, Viridian said. We have the high ground and the element of surprise. Blood Moon doesn't know we're here yet. She turned to her father. What's the northern strategy for breaking a siege? Gareth smiled. Aggressive and direct. We hit hard, hit fast, and create enough chaos that they can't maintain their positions. Your mother used to call it the avalanche strategy. Become an unstoppable force that destroys everything in its path. Sounds perfect. Viridian looked at her assembled forces, northern and southern, rogue and reformed, all united in common cause. We divide into 3 groups. Rhiannon takes the left flank, aiming for their siege equipment. Father takes the right, cuts off their retreat. I take the center and drive straight for their command position. That puts you in the most danger, Gareth protested. I'm already in danger. We all are. But Tiernan needs to see me. Needs to see that the Luna he thought would break is leading an army against him. Viridian drew her mother's sword. Let's give him a lesson in underestimating she-wolves. They attacked at dawn, when the sun rose behind them and blinded the Blood Moon warriors. The northern wolves came down the ridge like a storm, howling, fierce, utterly without mercy. Viridian led the charge, her mother's sword catching the light, her voice raised in a battle cry that she'd never known she possessed. Around her, 400 wolves descended on Tiernan's siege, and the surprised Blood Moon warriors scrambled to respond. The siege lines collapsed in chaos. Some warriors tried to hold formation, but northern wolves were fresh while they'd been fighting for days. Others tried to flee, only to find their retreat cut off by Gareth's flanking force. And in the center, Viridian carved her way toward Tiernan himself, surrounded by his elite guard but increasingly isolated as his army fractured around him. When she finally reached him, blood-spattered and breathing hard, he looked at her with disbelief. You, he said. You're supposed to be in the north. I was, Viridian replied. Making alliances. Building support. Learning that revolution can't be stopped by killing revolutionaries. She raised her sword. You attacked my pack. My home. My wolves. Now you answer for that. I was defending tradition, Tiernan shouted. Defending order against chaos. You were defending your own power. There's a difference. From the citadel walls, a new sound rose. Moonshadow wolves howling in triumph as they realized reinforcements had arrived. The gates opened, and what remained of the defending force poured out, joining the battle with renewed strength. Blood Moon was caught between 2 armies, their siege broken, their alpha cornered. Tiernan looked around at his crumbling forces, then back at Viridian. If you kill me, you're no better than what you claim to oppose. You're right, Viridian said, lowering her sword slightly. Which is why I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to let your pack decide what to do with you. Let them vote, the way we did with Cale. Let them choose whether they want an alpha who leads them into unwinnable wars, or whether they want something different. My pack would never. Your pack is already surrendering, Rhiannon said, appearing beside Viridian. She was covered in blood, but grinning fiercely. Your warriors chose survival over loyalty. They're asking for terms. Tiernan's face went white.
No.
They wouldn't. I'm their alpha. You were their alpha, Viridian corrected. Now you're just a wolf who made bad choices and has to face the consequences. The battle ended not with dramatic final confrontation, but with exhaustion and surrender. Blood Moon warriors laid down their weapons. The siege equipment was destroyed, and Tiernan was taken into custody, disarmed and defeated. Viridian walked through the shattered gates of Moonshadow, her sword still drawn, her pack gathering around her. They looked battered, bloody, exhausted, but they looked alive. Saren ran to her, tears streaming down her face. You came back. We thought, when we saw the Blood Moon coming, when they attacked so viciously, we thought we were alone. Never, Viridian said, pulling her into a fierce hug. We're back. That means we never abandon each other. More wolves gathered, the ones who'd stayed to defend while others had gone north, the forgotten who'd found courage enough to fight, even young pups who'd hidden in the cellars but survived. They were broken but not defeated, wounded but not destroyed, still standing, still free, still Moonshadow. And as the sun climbed higher, painting the battlefield in shades of gold and red, Viridian raised her mother's sword high. We held, she shouted. We survived. And we'll rebuild. The pack howled, a sound of triumph and defiance and unbreakable will. The revolution had faced its greatest test. And it had won. Chapter 13. The Price of Freedom. The aftermath of battle was always worse than the battle itself. Viridian learned this truth as she walked through Moonshadow's courtyard in the gray light of dawn, stepping carefully around the bodies that littered the blood-soaked stones. Some wore Bloodmoon's colors. Others wore Moonshadow's silver and blue. Too many were impossible to identify, just wolves who'd fought and died. Their stories ended before they could truly begin. 63. That was the count Sage gave her when the sun finally rose. 63 Moonshadow wolves killed defending their home. Another 112 wounded, some critically. The northern reinforcements had lost 37. Even Bloodmoon's dead numbered over 80, most of them young warriors who'd followed their alpha's orders without question. 282 wolves died because one alpha couldn't accept change. We need to burn them, Sage said, her ancient face etched with grief. Before disease spreads. The pyres should be ready by noon. Separate pyres, Viridian said. One for Moonshadow and our northern allies. Another for Blood Moon. Even enemies deserve proper rights.
Some won't like that.
Showing respect to wolves who tried to kill us. Then they can voice their objections in council. But we're not going to become what we fought against. We don't deny the dead their dignity, no matter which side they died on. The Great Hall, partially destroyed by Blood Moon's siege weapons, had been converted into a makeshift hospital. Every available surface held wounded wolves while healers moved between them, their hands never still, their faces drawn with exhaustion. Viridian found Rhiannon there, her left arm in a sling, a nasty gash across her ribs being stitched by one of Sage's assistants. You should be resting, Viridian said. So should you. Rhiannon nodded to the blood-soaked bandage wrapped around Viridian's thigh. When did you get that? I don't remember. Sometime during the fighting. It hurt now that adrenaline had faded, a deep ache that made her limp. But compared to some of the wounded around them, it was nothing. A young she-wolf, who couldn't be more than 16, lay on the next pallet, her breathing shallow, her body broken in ways that even Sage's skill might not repair. Neve sat beside her, holding her hand, whispering comfort. Her name is Paloma, Rhiannon said quietly. She was one of the forgotten, freed from the silence chambers 6 weeks ago. She'd just started to remember how to speak again. During the battle, she picked up a sword for the first time in her life and defended the eastern wall until it fell. Will she survive? Sage doesn't know. The wounds are Rhiannon's voice caught. She fought so hard to be free. It's not fair if she dies now. None of this is fair. Viridian watched Neve brush hair from the unconscious she-wolf's face. But she lived more in 6 weeks of freedom than in years of captivity. That has to count for something. Does it? Does it really? Rhiannon's voice was raw. I led them into this. I started the revolution that painted a target on our backs. Every wolf who died today died because of choices I made. Choices we made, Viridian corrected.
Together.
And choices they made too. No one forced them to fight. They chose to defend their freedom. Pretty words, but the dead are still dead. Viridian had no answer to that. So she sat beside Rhiannon in silence, 2 leaders carrying the weight of every wolf who'd trusted them. Gareth found her an hour later in what remained of the council chamber. She was staring at the damaged table, at the bloodstains that would never quite wash out, thinking about all the decisions that had led to this moment. Little wolf, her father said gently.
Come.
We need to talk. He led her to a quieter corner, away from the controlled chaos of recovery efforts. The northern packs want to pursue Blood Moon. Finish what we started. Ensure Tiernan's territory is pacified and reformed. No, Viridian said immediately. No. We're not conquerors. We're not going to invade Blood Moon and force them to change. That makes us exactly what Tiernan accused us of being, aggressors who destroy tradition through violence. But if we don't ensure Blood Moon is neutralized, they could attack again. Rebuild their forces. Come back stronger. Then we deal with that if it happens. But we're not going to become what we fought against just because it's strategically sound. Viridian met her father's eyes. That's what separates us from tyrants. We only fight when attacked. We don't seek war. We don't spread our ideology through conquest. Gareth studied her for a long moment. Your mother said something similar once. When I wanted to press an advantage against a rival pack, she told me that victory through domination breeds resentment, but peace through respect breeds allies. He smiled sadly. She was usually right about such things. So we let Blood Moon retreat to their territory. We take Tiernan as prisoner and let his pack decide his fate, just as we did with Kale. And we offer them the same choice we've offered everyone, reform or remain traditional, but do it peacefully. The Northern Alphas won't like it. They risked their wolves to help you. They'll want compensation. Territory, tribute, something. Then let them voice that in council. But my answer will be the same. Moonshadow doesn't pay for freedom with conquest. Viridian stood, wincing as her wounded leg protested. Call a meeting. All the Northern Alphas who fought, plus whoever's left of Moonshadow's leadership. We do this democratically. You're gambling everything on democracy holding, Gareth warned. What if they vote to invade Blood Moon? Then I'll live with that decision. But at least it will be our collective choice, not my tyranny. She limped toward the door. That's what we're building here, Father. Not a perfect system, but an honest one. The council meeting that afternoon was tense and crowded. The partially destroyed chamber couldn't hold everyone, so they met in the courtyard, wolves gathering in a wide circle around the speakers. Viridian stood at the center with Rhiannon, Maya, Gareth, and representatives from each northern pack that had fought. Tiernan stood in chains, guarded but present. They'd agreed he deserved to hear what would become of him. We face a choice, Viridian began, her voice carrying across the assembled wolves. Blood Moon attacked us, broke the coalition treaty, killed our wolves, and tried to destroy everything we've built. By any measure, we have the right to retaliate, to invade their territory, depose their leadership, and force them to accept our ways. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. But Viridian continued, if we do that, we become what they fear. We prove that revolution is just another word for conquest. That freedom is a lie we tell before we force our will on others. They attacked first, someone shouted from the crowd. We have the right to respond. We have the right to defend ourselves. Viridian agreed. Which we did. Successfully. But defense and conquest are different things. One is justice. The other is revenge. Alpha Cassius of Riverbend stepped forward. He'd arrived with 50 warriors 3 days into the siege, having heard of the attack and rode immediately to help. What do you propose instead? We can't just ignore that Blood Moon violated the treaty. There must be consequences.
There will be, Rhiannon said.
Tiernan will face judgment by his own pack. We'll return him to Blood Moon, not as their alpha, but as a prisoner. His wolves will vote on his fate and on their future. Reform or remain traditional, but do it peacefully. Any further aggression against Moonshadow or other progressive packs will be met by the combined forces of the North and South working together. You're giving them a choice after they attack us? Saren's voice was sharp with anger. She'd lost 2 close friends in the siege. They don't deserve choice. They deserve destruction. Maybe, Viridian said quietly. But we're not building a society based on what wolves deserve. We're building one based on what we believe is right. And I believe that every wolf, even those who've wronged us, deserves the chance to choose a better path. That's naive, said one of the northern alphas, Ronan of Ironwood. Wolves like Tiernan don't change. They just wait for the next opportunity to strike. Then his pack will deal with him. But we're not going to make that choice for them. Viridian looked around at the assembled wolves. I know many of you want revenge. I want to see Blood Moon punished. But ask yourselves, what kind of pack do we want to be? One that responds to violence with greater violence? Or one that holds fast to its principles even when it's hard? Principles don't protect borders, Ronan countered. No, but allies do, Gareth interjected. And we've made allies today, northern and southern packs working together against a common threat. That alliance is worth more than any territory we could seize. It proves that progressive and traditional packs can coexist and can support each other when attacked. I agree, Cassius said. What happened here today was historic. The North and South united in defense of freedom. If we ruin that by becoming conquerors, we lose something irreplaceable. The debate continued for hours. Some wolves argued for invasion, for ensuring Blood Moon could never threaten them again. Others supported Viridian's position, that remaining true to their principles was more important than strategic advantage. Finally, as the sun began to set, Viridian called for a vote. All those in favor of invading Blood Moon territory and forcing reform? Hands rose. Maybe 40% of the assembled wolves. All those in favor of returning Tiernan to his pack and allowing them to choose their own path, with the understanding that any further aggression will be met by our combined forces? More hands. 60%, roughly. Then it's decided, Viridian said. We offer peace, but we prepare for war. Tiernan was surprisingly quiet when they told him of the decision. He'd listened to the entire debate, his expression cycling through anger, disbelief, and finally something that might have been resignation. You're making a mistake, he said as they prepared him for transport back to Blood Moon. My pack won't vote to reform. They believe in the old ways. Then they'll vote to maintain tradition, Viridian replied. But it will be their choice, not yours. And if they choose me as alpha again, if they decide my attack was justified, then you'll lead them. But you'll do it knowing that any further aggression brings the full force of the Northern and Southern alliances down on your territory. You'll be one pack against many. She met his eyes. Is that really a fight you want? Tiernan looked away. I don't understand you. Any of you. You have power. The strength to crush your enemies. Why do you keep choosing mercy? Because mercy requires more courage than cruelty, Rhiannon said, appearing beside Viridian. Because we've lived under tyrants who chose violence over compassion. We know what that creates: fear, resentment, and eventually rebellion. We're trying to build something different. It won't last, Tiernan said, but he sounded less certain now. Wolves need hierarchy. Need order. We have order, Viridian said. Just not the kind you're used to. Democracy is messy and loud and frustrating. But it's also strong in ways tyranny never can be. Because every wolf chooses to participate. Every wolf has a stake in our success. They sent Tyran back to Blood Moon the next morning, escorted by a mixed force of Northern and Moonshadow warriors, not to invade, but to ensure he arrived safely and to observe the vote his pack would hold. Vance led the escort, having volunteered for the dangerous duty. If this works, he said before departing, if Blood Moon actually holds a fair vote and chooses their path peacefully, it could change everything. Prove that even the most traditional packs can evolve. And if it doesn't work? Neve asked. Then we've learned what doesn't work. And we will try something else. Vance touched his heart in the warrior's salute. Until we return. Until then, Viridian echoed. The Northern allies departed over the next 3 days. Their warriors needed back home, but their commitment to the alliance reaffirmed. Each alpha met privately with Viridian before leaving, offering support and pledging to stand with Moonshadow if Blood Moon, or any other pack, attacked again. Gareth was the last to leave. He stood with Viridian in the gardens, now trampled and scarred from the battle but slowly recovering, new shoots already pushing through damaged earth. I'm proud of you, he said simply. What you've built here, what you've stood for, it's remarkable. I learned from the best, Viridian replied, leaning against him. You and Mother both. You taught me that leadership is service, that strength includes mercy, that the hardest choices are usually the right ones. Your mother would have loved Moonshadow. She always chafed at limitations, even the gentle ones. He touched the moonstone pendant at Viridian's throat. She wore that in every battle. It's meant to protect the wearer, or so the old legends say. It's protected me, Viridian agreed. Or maybe it just reminded me who I'm fighting for. Not just the wolves here, but all the she-wolves who came before. The ones who submitted because they had no choice. The ones who fought and lost. The ones who dreamed of freedom but never lived to see it. Heavy burden, Gareth observed. Necessary one. She straightened, meeting her father's eyes. I'm not coming back, am I? To the north. To Frostborn. Do you want to? Viridian looked around at the damaged citadel, at wolves working together to rebuild, at the new world taking shape amid the ruins. This is my home now. These are my wolves. I can't abandon them. I didn't think so. Gareth pulled her into a final embrace. But know that Frostborn is always here if you need it. Always ready to stand with you. You're my daughter before you're any pack's leader. Remember that. I will. Thank you, Father, for everything. After he left, Viridian stood alone in the gardens, watching the sun set over Moonshadow. Around her, wolves worked to clear debris, repair walls, and comfort the grieving. They moved with purpose despite their exhaustion, driven by something stronger than duty. Hope. The hope that what they were building mattered. That the wolves who died defending it hadn't died in vain. That freedom, once won, could be maintained. Luna? A small voice. Viridian turned to find a young pup, couldn't be more than 8, holding a handful of wildflowers. I picked these for the memorial. For the wolves who died. Is that okay? Viridian knelt, ignoring the protest from her wounded leg. It's perfect. What's her name?
Wren.
Like the elderly. She's my grandmother. The pup looked at the flowers. I was scared during the battle. I hid in the cellars. But grandmother fought. She killed 3 Blood Moon warriors to protect us. Your grandmother is a hero, Viridian said gently. Are you a hero too? Everyone says you are. That you came back with an army and saved us. I'm just a wolf who refuses to let her pack fight alone. Viridian touched one of the flowers. But you know what real heroes are? Wolves who are scared but fight anyway. Wolves who stay strong even when everything is falling apart. Wolves like your grandmother, who've lived through darkness and still choose light. Will there be more fighting? Wren asked, fear creeping into her young voice. Maybe. Probably. The world is changing, and change always meets resistance. Viridian took the pup's hand. But I promise you this. As long as Moonshadow stands, as long as wolves like your grandmother and me and everyone in this pack keep fighting, you'll have a place where you can grow up free. Where you can choose who you want to be. I want to be a warrior, Wren said with sudden fierceness. Like grandmother. Like you. I want to protect other pups so they don't have to be scared. Then you will be. And when you're old enough, I'll train you myself. Viridian stood. Come. Let's place those flowers at the memorial together. They walked through the courtyard to where the funeral pyres had burned, now just circles of ash with stone markers being erected. Ren placed her flowers carefully at the base of one marker, then stepped back and saluted the way she'd seen warriors do. It was a small moment, insignificant in the grand scheme of revolution and war and political machinations. But it was also everything. Because this, a pup learning that she could be a warrior, that her choices mattered, that her freedom was worth protecting, this was what they'd fought for. Not grand political theories or abstract ideals, but the simple right for every wolf to determine their own path. As night fell over Moonshadow, Viridian gathered with her council, smaller now, diminished by the wolves who'd fallen, but still standing. "The northern allies are gone," Rhiannon said. "We're on our own again." "We have the alliance treaty," Maya reminded her. "If Blood Moon or anyone else attacks, they'll return." "If they can get here in time," Saren said. "The north is far. We can't rely on rescue." "Then we rebuild stronger," Vance said. He'd returned from Blood Moon with news. Tiernan's pack had voted to depose him and install new leadership. The vote on reform had been close, but tradition had won by a narrow margin. Still, they'd committed to upholding the peace treaty and living peacefully alongside progressive packs. "One crisis averted," Rhiannon said. "How many more are waiting?" "As many as it takes," Viridian replied. "We knew this wouldn't be easy. Revolution never is. But every day we survive, every challenge we overcome, we prove that this works. That wolves can choose freedom and live." "At what cost?" Saren asked quietly. 63 dead. The citadel half destroyed. Our resources are depleted. How many more battles can we survive?" "As many as we have to," Viridian said firmly. "Because the alternative is surrender, is going back to chains, is telling every she-wolf who's watching that freedom isn't worth fighting for." She looked around at her council, these wolves who'd become her family. "I know you're tired. I know you're scared. I am too. But we can't stop now. We're not just fighting for Moonshadow. We're fighting for every pack that wants to change. Every she-wolf who wants to choose. Every pup deserves to grow up free." "Then we keep fighting," Maya said, and the others nodded agreement. They talked late into the night, planning rebuilding efforts, discussing security improvements, debating how to handle the next crisis when it came. Because it would come. They all knew that. The old order didn't die easily, and there were still wolves throughout the south who saw Moonshadow as a threat that needed to be eliminated. But for tonight, they'd survived. They defended their home, maintained their principles, and proven that revolution could withstand the ultimate test. And tomorrow, they'd start building again. Because that's what wolves did. They endured. They adapted. They survived. And sometimes, if they were very brave and very lucky, they thrived. Chapter 14. Moonshadow Rising. Spring came to Moonshadow 6 months after the Blood Moon siege. Viridian stood on the newly rebuilt western wall, watching the morning sun paint the valley in shades of gold and green. Below, the citadel grounds bustled with activity, not the frantic urgency of recovery, but the steady rhythm of a pack finding its pace. So much had changed in half a year. The damaged walls had been rebuilt, stronger than before. The Great Hall, once a monument to alpha dominance, had been redesigned with a circular council chamber where every seat was equal. The silence chambers remained sealed beneath their memorial cairn, but above them, they'd built a library open to all, a place where knowledge replaced oppression. But the physical changes were nothing compared to the transformation of the wolves themselves. "Luna, sorry, Viridian." A voice called from below. She'd asked them to stop calling her Luna months ago, but old habits died hard. A young she-wolf climbed the wall stairs, carrying a dispatch case. Messages from the coalition packs. And one from the north. Viridian accepted them with a smile. "Thank you, Dahlia. How are your warrior trials going?" The she-wolf beamed. "I made the second rank yesterday. Instructor Breyer says I have natural talent with the bow. Your mother would be proud." Dahlia's mother had died in the siege, one of the 63. But instead of being crushed by grief, the young she-wolf had channeled it into becoming exactly what Moonshadow needed, a warrior who fought not from hate, but from love of what she was protecting. After Dahlia left, Viridian opened the dispatches. The coalition news was mixed as always. Riverbend continued to thrive under its reformed structure, with Alpha Cassius and Luna Elora ruling as true partners. Stonecrest remained traditionally structured, but had softened some of its harsher practices. No more silence chambers, at least. Blackwater had split into two separate packs, traditional and progressive, and while tensions remained, they'd maintained an uneasy peace. Blood Moon was a surprise. After deposing Tiernan, they'd elected a new alpha, a younger wolf named Callum who'd fought in the siege and been horrified by the senseless violence. He'd written personally to Viridian, apologizing for his pack's actions and requesting a meeting to discuss establishing formal relations. "Miracles do happen," Rhiannon said, joining Viridian on the wall. She'd healed well from her wounds, though she still favored her left side on cold mornings. Blood Moon actually wants peace. "Callum wants peace," Viridian corrected. "I'm not sure his entire pack agrees, but it's progress." "Everything's been progressing lately. Have you seen the refugee numbers?" Rhiannon pulled out a ledger. "We've settled 473 wolves in the past 6 months. They keep coming, she-wolves fleeing traditional packs, males who believe in equality, entire families sometimes." "Can we support that many?" "Barely. We've expanded into the Western Territories, established 2 satellite settlements. But Viridian..." Rhiannon's expression grew serious. "We're becoming something bigger than a pack. We're becoming a movement, and that brings new dangers." "I know." Viridian had been thinking about this a lot lately. Moonshadow's success was inspiring, but it also made them a target. Every wolf they took in was a wolf some other alpha had lost. Every she-wolf who escaped to join them was a symbol of what traditional packs feared most. "The coalition is fracturing," Rhiannon continued. "Riverbend and the reformed section of Blackwater are talking about forming a separate alliance, progressive packs united in mutual defense. They want Moonshadow to lead it. We're not conquerors," Viridian said immediately. "We're not building an empire. No one's asking you to. They're asking for leadership, guidance, a symbol that reform is possible." Rhiannon touched her arm. "You've become more than a revolutionary, Viridian. You're a legend. The Luna who refused to kneel, who burned down tyranny and built something better from the ashes. Wolves across the South tell their pups about you. That's terrifying. That's my responsibility." Rhiannon smiled. "Welcome to being a founder. You don't just create a new society, you become the symbol of what it stands for." "I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to survive. And in surviving, you gave others hope. That's more powerful than any throne." The morning council meeting was, as always, chaotic and argumentative, and somehow functional. Maya presented the updated census data. Their population had swelled to over 800 wolves, making them the second largest pack in the South after Stonecrest. Vance reported on border security, all quiet, with regular patrols coordinating with northern allies. Saren discussed the integration of new refugees, the challenges of blending wolves from different cultures and traditions. And then Kale spoke. It still surprised some wolves to see him at the council table, though by now most had accepted his presence. He'd spent the past 6 months working tirelessly, helping rebuild, teaching reformed Shadowfen warriors how to unlearn oppressive habits, even counseling males from other packs who struggled with the new equality. "I've been corresponding with alphas from traditional packs," he said, his voice carrying the authority he'd once wielded as a tyrant, but now used for different purposes. "Many are frightened. They see what's happening here, sea-wolves fleeing to join you, and they fear their entire society is collapsing." "It is," Saren said bluntly. "Good riddance." "Perhaps. But fear makes wolves dangerous. Desperate." Kale pulled out several letters. "I've received inquiries from 5 different packs, not asking how to stop change, but asking how to implement it without their packs tearing apart. They're reaching out to me because I'm proof that even the worst tyrant can learn." "What are you suggesting?" Viridian asked. "That we offer guidance. Not conquest or forced reform, but genuine help to packs that want to change but don't know how. We could send advisors, share our experiences, help them avoid the mistakes we made. You want to export revolution, Rhiannon said slowly, but peacefully. I want to prove that change doesn't have to be violent. That pack can evolve without civil war. Kale met Viridian's eyes. You showed mercy to Blood Moon.
To me.
That mercy is why we're winning hearts and minds. If we extend it further, offer help instead of judgment, we could transform the entire South without another drop of blood. The council debated for hours. Some argued it was too risky. Sending wolves into traditional packs made them vulnerable to capture or worse. Others insisted it was exactly what they should do, lead by example, prove that revolution could be compassionate. Finally, Viridian called for a vote. The decision passed narrowly. They would offer advisory services to any pack that requested them voluntarily, but they would not pressure or proselytize. Progress through choice, Viridian said. Not through force. That's who we are. That afternoon, Viridian visited the healing center, where the Forgotten continued their recovery. Sage had worked miracles with them. Of the 43 she-wolves freed from the silence chambers, 37 had regained significant function. Some would never fully recover. The damage had been too severe, the time below too long. But others, like Cleo, had not only recovered but thrived. Cleo now worked as an assistant healer, her gentle manner perfect for helping other traumatized wolves. When Viridian entered, she was sitting with Isolde, the she-wolf from Stonecrest who'd arrived 6 months ago, barely able to speak. Tell her, Cleo encouraged softly. Isolde looked up at Viridian, and in her eyes was something that hadn't been there before, light.
Life. Hope.
I want to go back, Isolde said, her voice stronger than Viridian had ever heard it. To Stonecrest. Not to live there, but to visit. To tell my sister what I found here. To show her that escape is possible. Stonecrest is still traditionally structured, Viridian warned. It could be dangerous. I know. But my sister is still there. Still trapped. Still believing that submission is the only option. Isolde's hands trembled, but her voice remained steady. I was like her once. I thought I had no choice. But then I found a choice. Found freedom. I found myself. She deserves the same chance. Then you'll go with a full escort, Viridian decided. And you'll carry an official message from Moonshadow to Stonecrest's Alpha. If they harm you, they'll answer to the entire Northern and Southern Alliance. Isolde smiled, a real smile, the first Viridian had seen from her. Thank you. For everything. For building a place where broken wolves can remember what the whole world feels like. After leaving the healing center, Viridian found herself drawn to the memorial cairn. She came here often, standing before the stones that marked where the silence chambers had been, reading the names carved into rock. 63 from the siege. 23 from the original revolution. 17 who died escaping traditional packs to reach Moonshadow. Hundreds more whose names were lost. The Forgotten who died in the chambers. The she-wolves who'd been erased from history. We remember you, Viridian whispered, as she always did. We built this for you. We're living the freedom you died wanting. And we won't let it be destroyed. Talking to the dead again? Neve's voice, gentle with understanding. She came to the memorial often too, paying respects to the servant who'd been whipped for spilling wine. Her aunt, Viridian, had learned. The woman who'd inspired Neve's quiet rebellion. Reminding myself why we fight, Viridian said. It's easy to get caught up in politics and strategy. To forget that she gestured to the memorial, this is what it's all about. Wolves who deserved better. Who died wanting it. Who we honor by making sure their sacrifice meant something. It meant everything, Neve said firmly. She'd grown so much in 6 months. No longer the trembling servant, she now served on the council as representative for refugee wolves, her voice strong when advocating for those still finding their way. Every wolf who comes here, every she-wolf who arrives terrified and leaves strong, every pup who grows up free, they're the meaning. The living proof that change is possible. They stood together in silence, 2 wolves who'd been broken and had chosen to rebuild themselves. That evening, Moonshadow held its first formal celebration since the siege, the Spring Festival, marking both the season and the pack's rebirth. The courtyard had been transformed. Lanterns hung from every surface, casting warm light across stones that had once run red with blood. Long tables groaned under food, enough for everyone, traditional dishes from both north and south, prepared by wolves working together. Music filled the air, not one style, but many blending together. Northern drums, southern strings, rogue flutes, all creating something new. Viridian watched from the steps as wolves gathered, she-wolves and males dancing together, pups running freely without fear, elders laughing for the first time in decades. Rogues and reformed Shadowfen wolves sharing stories, northern and southern traditions mixing without conflict. It wasn't perfect. She could see the tensions that remained. Some reformed warriors still uncomfortable with she-wolf authority, some rogues still suspicious of males, older wolves struggling to adapt to rapid change. But they were trying, learning,
Growing.
"May I have this dance?" Rhiannon appeared, offering her hand with a theatrical bow. "I'm not much of a dancer," Viridian protested, but she took the offered hand anyway. They moved onto the courtyard floor, and others made space. Not out of deference, there were no deferential bows in Moonshadow anymore, but out of respect and affection. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" Rhiannon asked as they danced. "We've built something amazing, but it's still so fragile. One bad harvest, one determined enemy, one internal conflict could bring it all down." "I think about it constantly," Viridian admitted. "But I also think about this." She gestured to the celebration around them. 6 months ago, we were fighting for our lives. Now we're dancing. That's not fragile. That's resilient. Optimist.
Realist.
We've survived impossible odds before. We'll do it again." Viridian smiled. "Besides, we're not alone anymore. We have allies. We have wolves who believe in what we're building. We have hope." "Hope," Rhiannon repeated. "That's what you've given them. Given all of us. The hope that we're more than what was done to us. That we can be more than survivors. We can be architects of something new." The dance ended, and they were immediately surrounded by pack members wanting to talk, to share stories, to simply be near their leaders. Viridian spoke with them all, the young warrior seeking advice, the mother wondering how to explain the old ways to her daughter, the male who'd fled his traditional pack and still struggled with guilt. She listened to their fears and their dreams, their struggles and their triumphs. This was leadership she'd learned. Not grand speeches or dramatic gestures, but the daily work of listening, understanding, and helping wolves find their path. As midnight approached, Maya called for attention. The old she-wolf stood on a raised platform, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet courtyard. 6 months ago, we stood in ruins. Our home damaged, our wolves wounded, our future uncertain. But we chose to rebuild. Not the way things were, but the way they should be. She looked around at the assembled pack. Tonight, we celebrate not just spring, but rebirth. The death of Shadowfen and the rise of Moonshadow. The end of submission and the beginning of choice. Howls rose, joyful, defiant, free. We honor those who fell. Maya continued when silence returned. The 63 who died defending freedom. The nameless forgotten who died wanting it. Every she-wolf who fought and bled and suffered so we could stand here tonight. Wolves bowed their heads, and Viridian felt tears prick her eyes as she thought of Isolde from the siege, of the servant whipped for spilling wine, of every wolf who'd paid the price for their freedom. "And we celebrate those who live," Maya said, her voice growing stronger. "Who chose courage over comfort? Who built something new from broken pieces? Who proved that wolves can change, can grow, can be better than their worst impulses?" She raised her cup high. "To Moonshadow." "To Moonshadow," the pack echoed, voices blending into one. "To freedom, to freedom, and to the she-wolves who refused to kneel." The howls that followed shook the very walls of the citadel, a sound of triumph and defiance and unbreakable will. Later, when the celebration had wound down and wolves drifted toward their dens, Viridian found herself on her balcony once more. The same spot where she'd stood so many times, first as a captive Luna learning the depth of her cage, then as a revolutionary planning rebellion, then as a leader struggling to build from ruins. The moon hung full and bright above, silver light washing over Moonshadow territory. In that light, she could see the changes they'd wrought. New buildings rising, gardens growing wild and beautiful, wolves moving freely without fear. "You're thinking too loud," her father's voice said. Gareth had come for the celebration, bringing news from the north and rekindling their alliance. "I can hear it from inside." "Just reflecting," Viridian said, "on how far we've come, how far we still have to go." "Your mother used to do the same thing. Stand on balconies, watching the moon, carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders." He joined her at the railing. "She told me once that leadership was like the moon, constantly changing phases, waxing and waning, but always there. Always watching. Always pulling at the tides." Poetic. She was sometimes, especially when she was worried. He looked at his daughter. "What worries you tonight, little wolf?" "Everything. Nothing. The future." Viridian struggled to articulate the feeling. "We've accomplished so much. But I look at the map and see how small we are. One pack in a world that's mostly unchanged. What if this is as far as we get? What if we're just an anomaly, a brief moment of light before the darkness closes back in?" "Then you would have still mattered," Gareth said firmly. "Do you know how many she-wolves have fled north in the past 6 months? How many packs have quietly implemented reforms because they saw what you accomplished? You think Moonshadow is small, but its influence spreads like wildfire. Or like a disease, depending on who you ask." Both metaphors work. Change always looks like illness to those who benefit from sickness. He turned her to face him. "Listen to me. What you've built here will outlast you, will outlast all of us. Because you didn't just create a new pack, you created proof. Proof that wolves can choose freedom and thrive. That she-wolves can lead as well as any male. That mercy and strength aren't opposites." "I'm not special," Viridian protested. I just did what I had to do to survive. And in surviving, you showed thousands of other wolves how to do the same. That's what makes you extraordinary, not that you're different from them, but that you're exactly like them. You were scared and trapped and broken, and you chose to fight anyway. Every she-wolf who hears your story sees herself in it. Seems that if you could do it, maybe they can too." Viridian looked out at Moonshadow again, seeing it through her father's eyes. Not a small pack struggling to survive, but a beacon. A promise. Proof that another way was possible. "I wish Mother could see this," she said softly. "She does," Gareth said with certainty. "The moon goddess watches over all wolves, but especially the ones brave enough to howl at her. And your mother, my fierce, unstoppable mate, she's howling with you. I'm certain of it." They stood together as the moon climbed higher, father and daughter, watching over a revolution that had just begun to spread. The next morning, Viridian convened the council for one final decision. "The progressive packs have formally requested that we lead their alliance," she announced. Riverbend, Reformed Blackwater, and 3 smaller territories want Moonshadow to serve as the symbolic center of the reform movement. "Symbolic how?" Vance asked. "They want to use our name. Call themselves the Moonshadow Alliance. Use our principles as their charter." Viridian looked around the table. "This is bigger than anything we've attempted. It would make us the face of reform across the South. The target for every traditional pack that opposes change." "We're already a target," Saren pointed out. "Might as well be a target that actually accomplishes something." "But it changes our mission," Maya said thoughtfully. "We'd no longer be just a pack. We'd be a movement, a philosophy, something abstract that wolves could rally around or against." "I think we already are," Rhiannon said. "We've been trying to be just a pack, but that ship sailed the moment we defeated Kale. The moment word spread about what we'd accomplished. Like it or not, we're a symbol now. The question is whether we embrace that role or let others define it for us." "If we do this," Kale added, We need to be very clear about what we're offering. Not conquest. Not forced conversion. Just an example. A model that works for wolves who choose it. The debate continued for hours, weighing risks and benefits, discussing what such an alliance would mean practically and philosophically. Finally, Viridian stood. I think we need to be honest about what we are. We're not perfect. We're messy and loud, and we make mistakes constantly. But we're also proof. Proof that change is possible. That wolves can govern themselves democratically. That she-wolves and males can stand as equals. That freedom, real freedom, is worth fighting for. She looked around at her council, rogues and reformed warriors, she-wolves and males, young and old, all united in common purpose. So here's what I propose. We accept the invitation, but on our terms. The Moonshadow Alliance will be a coalition of equals. No pack has authority over another. We share resources, provide mutual defense, and support each other's reforms. But each pack maintains autonomy. Each wolf keeps their choice. A federation, Vance said slowly. Not an empire.
Exactly.
We're not building Shadowfen again. We're building something that's never existed, a society where power flows from consent, not dominance. The vote was unanimous. The Moonshadow Alliance would be born. 1 year after the fall of Shadowfen, Viridian stood before a gathering unlike any the South had ever seen. Representatives from 12 packs filled the amphitheater, not the coalition gathering grounds, but a new neutral space established specifically for the Alliance. She-wolves and males sat together. Traditional and progressive packs mixed freely. Even a few northern alphas attended as observers, including her father. We gather here today, Viridian began, her voice carrying across the assembled wolves, to formalize what we've already become, a family of packs united not by conquest or coercion, but by shared values. The Moonshadow Alliance stands for choice, equality, and freedom. We offer these principles to any pack that wants them. We defend them against any pack that threatens them, but we force them on no one. She looked out at the sea of faces, so diverse, so different, yet all united in believing that wolves deserved better than the old ways offered. A year ago, I was a captive Luna, learning the true meaning of oppression. I stood before an alpha who believed submission was sacred and spoke when I was supposed to be silent. That small act of defiance sparked something that grew into this. She gestured to the gathered packs.
You.
All of you. Wolves who chose courage over comfort. Who risked everything to build something better. Who proved that change, real change, is possible. The road ahead won't be easy. There will be packs that oppose us. Wolves who fear what we represent. Battles we'll have to fight. Sacrifices we'll have to make. But we face those challenges together. As equals. As allies. As a family. She raised her mother's sword. No longer just a weapon, but a symbol of what they'd accomplished. This is the founding of the Moonshadow Alliance. May it stand as long as wolves choose freedom. May it grow as strong as our collective will. And may every she-wolf who suffers under tyranny know that we're here. That resistance is possible. That she doesn't have to face her chains alone. The howls that rose could be heard for miles. A chorus of voices that had been silent for too long, finally given sound. The revolution was no longer about one pack, one territory, one Luna who refused to kneel. It had become something greater. Something that would outlast any individual wolf. It had become hope. 5 years after the founding of the Moonshadow Alliance, Viridian watched her pack celebrate another spring festival. The citadel was barely recognizable from the fortress of fear it had once been. Gardens bloomed everywhere, wolves laughed freely, and the sound of pups playing echoed through halls that had once known only silence. Moonshadow had grown to over 1,500 wolves. The alliance comprised 23 packs across the south and had formal treaties with 8 northern territories. Reform was spreading, slowly, imperfectly, but steadily. Viridian herself had changed too. No longer the terrified young Luna sent south for alliance, no longer even the revolutionary fighting for survival. She'd grown into her role, A leader who guided rather than commanded, who listened more than she spoke, who understood that true strength was in empowering others. Are you going to stand up there all night? Never called from below. She'd become one of the Alliance's chief diplomats, traveling between packs to facilitate reforms and mediate disputes. Come dance with us. I'm too old for dancing, Viridian called back, laughing. You're 27. That's not old. Rhiannon appeared at her elbow, looking amused. Though I understand the feeling. Some days I feel ancient. Ancient at 32. How tragic. Viridian smiled at her fellow leader. They'd shared the burden of building Moonshadow, and over the years had become closer than sisters. Do you ever regret it? Rhiannon asked suddenly. The path we chose? You could have been a comfortable Luna somewhere. Had pups. Lived a quiet life. Under a tyrant's paw. Submitting every day until I forgot I'd ever been free. Viridian shook her head.
No.
I don't regret burning down comfortable lies to build an uncomfortable truth. Even with everything it costs. Me neither. Rhiannon looked out at the celebrating pack. We did something impossible, you and I. We changed the world. We started changing it, Viridian corrected. The work continues. Always will. That's the nature of freedom. It's not something you win once and keep forever. It's something you have to choose every day, over and over. Philosophical tonight. Reflective. There's a difference. Viridian touched the moonstone pendant at her throat, her mother's, still protecting her after all these years. I've been thinking about what we leave behind. Our legacy. Moonshadow is your legacy. The Alliance. The thousands of she-wolves who live free because you refuse to kneel. That's not enough. I want to make sure it lasts. That when we're gone, the principles remain. Viridian had been working on something, a charter, a codified set of values that would outlast any individual leader. We need to write it down. The why of what we've built. So future generations understand. A constitution for wolves, Rhiannon said thoughtfully. I like it. What would it say? That every wolf has the right to choose their path. That power comes from consent, not coercion. That strength includes mercy. That the strongest packs are those where every voice matters. Viridian looked at her friend. Help me write it? You and Maya and the council? Make it something that speaks for all of us. I'd be honored. Below, the music swelled and wolves began to howl, not in pain or fear or submission, but in joy. Pure, uninhibited joy. And Viridian realized this was what they'd fought for. Not grand political structures or abstract principles, but moments like this. Wolves being wolves, free to feel, free to choose, free to live. Come on, Rhiannon said, pulling her toward the stairs. They want their leaders to celebrate too. And I refuse to let you stand up here brooding when there's perfectly good food and music below. Viridian let herself be pulled along, laughing, feeling lighter than she had in months. They descended into the courtyard, into the noise and light and life of a pack that had learned to thrive. As she danced with her wolves, no longer subjects, but equals and friends, Viridian caught her father's eye across the courtyard. He raised his cup in salute, pride evident in every line of his weathered face. And she felt her mother there too, in the moonlight and the music, in the laughter of free wolves, in every small victory that added up to revolution. The moon hung full and bright above, watching over them all. Silent witness to the impossible made real. To chains broken and wolves freed. To a Luna who'd refused to kneel and built an empire from that refusal. But not an empire of dominance. An empire of choice. Of hope. Of freedom. And as the music played, and the wolves danced, and the moon watched over them all, Viridian understood something fundamental. This was just the beginning. The revolution would continue long after she was gone, carried forward by every wolf who chose courage over comfort, by every she-wolf who refused to be silent, by every pack that decided freedom was worth fighting for. They'd built something that would outlast them all. Not because it was perfect, but because it was true. 20 years later, The old she-wolf stood before the memorial cairn, her silver-streaked hair catching the afternoon light. Around her, young pups played without fear, their laughter echoing off stone walls that had once known only oppression. Grandmother, one pup called Wren's daughter, named Viridian in honor of the legend. Tell us the story again, about the Luna who burned the world. The old she-wolf smiled, settling onto the stone bench that had been placed there for exactly this purpose, for elders to share history with the young who'd never known chains. It begins, she said, as she always did, with a choice. A young she-wolf sent south for alliance, discovering that peace built on submission is no peace at all. The pups gathered close, wide-eyed, as Viridian told the story of revolution, of courage found in impossible places, of wolves who'd chosen freedom even when it meant war. Some details had become legend, enhanced by time, embellished by repetition. But the core remained true, that once, wolves had lived in chains. And then they'd chosen not to. When the story ended, as it always did, with the founding of the Alliance and the promise that freedom would continue, one pup asked, "Is it true? Did she really kill an alpha with her bare hands?" "She did many remarkable things," Viridian replied. But the most remarkable thing was simply refusing to surrender, refusing to let them break her. That's the real magic, not in grand battles or dramatic gestures, but in the daily choice to remain free. "Is she still alive?" another pup asked. "The first Viridian?" The old she-wolf looked up at the moon, just visible in the afternoon sky, pale and watching. "In a way, she'll never die. Every time a she-wolf stands tall instead of bowing. Every time a wolf chooses their own path. Every time someone says no to tyranny, she lives. That's what heroes really are. Not gods or legends, but choices. Made over and over by ordinary wolves who decide to be extraordinary." The pups considered this, then ran off to play their games, already incorporating the story into their make-believe, taking turns being the brave Luna and the evil Alpha and the wolves who chose freedom. Viridian watched them go, these children who'd never known the weight of chains, who'd grow up believing choice was natural rather than revolutionary. This was the victory, not in battles won or territories claimed, but in the children who couldn't imagine any other way. She stood, her old bones protesting, and began the walk back to her chambers. The young she-wolf who'd refused to kneel had become an elder who walked slowly. But she walked with her head high, unbroken after all these years. Because some wolves were born to submit, and others were born to burn down the world and build something better from the ashes. She'd been the latter, and she'd never regretted a single flame. They say the moon remembers every howl, every prayer whispered by wolves in darkness, every promise made in blood and kept through sacrifice. If that's true, then the moon remembers them, the she-wolves who refused to be silenced, who chose freedom even when it cost everything, who burned down tyranny and built hope from its ashes. Their names are carved in stone and memory. Their story is told to pups who've never known chains. Their legacy is a world where every wolf can choose their path. And on nights when the moon hangs full and bright, you can almost hear them, those revolutionary wolves, those impossible heroes, howling still. Not in pain or fear or submission, but in triumph, in defiance, in the eternal, unbreakable song of the free.
The end.
Thank you for joining this journey through the Luna who burned the world. Much love.